Hello.
Cool.
Au revoir.
Hi, everybody. I'd wave,
Bonjour.
but you can't see me.
It's a nonverbal wave. No. It's a verbal wave. There we go. Fred?
I'm trying to work
Say
out how to
something, Fred.
do a
I'm here.
verbal wave.
Hey,
Hello,
9 minutes
everyone.
in. 9 minutes in. This is a new record.
Yeah. We're almost there, folks. Almost. Oh, there's Liz with the smart aleck cracks. Any wagers on the actual start time?
Yeah, I saw that.
Okay, let's see. Why is that not showing up? Okay, lovely.
Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting? Why are we waiting?
A Christmas-themed show. Nope. Of course not. Okay, let me turn off the mixer for a second.
Glad I spent all this money on microphones when the Wi-Fi makes me sound like a duck anyway. I'm assuming you didn't hear that either.
Okay. Well, are you talking to me?
Yeah, I'm just testing my audio.
Okay. Because I had to turn off my mixer to set this up. And it's still not connected. Input. There we go. Output. Okay. Now, let me assign the iPad to stereo 7. My mic to mono 3. And the MacBook to mono 5. That should do it. Entertain the folks in the chat room if you don't mind. Ah, Fred's gone. And Nick is muted. Am I on the air?
Probably wise. Probably why nothing was happening.
Oh, okay. Well, I still see the square. The video, maybe he just turned off his video, but I still see his thumbnail square.
Oh, he's
Fred.
doubled up now. We got two Freds.
Yeah, looks like we dropped Fred. There he is.
Twin brother.
So we're all having fun with bandwidth. Nice. Okay. Let's see here. I think I have everything set for recording. Let me just do a check here.
Experimenting before we start the show.
What's that?
I'm experimenting to see whether I can bring up some video before we start the show, but audio's dropped off again.
Yeah, no, we're not sure what you're saying.
Yeah. I'm experimenting to see whether I can bring up some video before we start the show, but audio's dropped off again. Yeah, not sure what you're saying. Going to be another scintillating show this morning.
Yes, it's going to be fascinating.
Nick, we need to update your pictures with various facial expressions, and that way, you know, when your video breaks up, we can do surprise, disapproving, questioning, and just
what a jolly good idea. And
Little cartoon me.
Oh, this is great. Right in front of my window, I have one of, those things that are on high-rise buildings, outside when they're cleaning windows and stuff, like a platform.
Oh, yeah.
It's like exactly right in front of my room, and I see these guys on it with their
Is
paint.
Tom Cruise balancing from the platform?
Oh, this is great. This is perfect. The guy is getting out a scraping tool. Can you hear that?
Yeah, we can hear.
Oh, God. Here, I'm going to turn the gate off. You can... I mean, he's actually scraping right on my window. Could it get any better than that?
Well, hopefully it won't take too long. Nice one.
It sounds like it doesn't. It sounds. Use your imagination. It sounds interesting. So why is this not recording?
That's dreadful, Jeff.
This guy. Oh, this is lovely. I guess it must be the paint splatter or something like that, and he's using some kind of a scraping tool on the actual glass. Here, let me see if I can show you this. I think you get a kick out of this. Here we go. I don't know if you can see.
Oh,
see
yeah.
This guy?
Absolutely.
So I wonder if he
He
knows
looks like
he's
he's.
on.
He looks like he's rocking the business in the front, party in the back haircut there.
Yeah. So see, now you get an idea what's going on here.
A beautiful skylight, though.
Yeah, it's nice. This is podcasting at its finest right there. Okay. So it looks like my Adobe Audition has crashed. Lovely.
Perfect.
Got the old Mac beach ball. Yay. All right. Let's see if I can shut that down. Not responding. Force quit. Yes, force quit.
Great noise.
Thank you. Well, as we wait for them to scrape my window, hopefully they'll do this quickly and move on. It gives me time to figure out what's going on with my Adobe Audition.
I love the way that Hangout, when you get a bit of a break, it tries to catch the audio up by making everyone talk twice as fast as they were.
Yes, I especially love it with the music. All of a sudden, at the very beginning, I'm thinking, what the hell is that?
By the way, is my audio level okay? Even if the quality
Yes.
isn't great.
Level sounds good. Levels are good. Oh, boy.
You guys seen that show Stomp? That Vegas show where they smash things. That's what it sounds like.
Well, I haven't seen it. I've heard of it, but I have not seen it.
It sounds just like that.
Oh, really?
It starts with scraping.
Oh, nice. Okay. Yeah, but I think it's a little bit more entertaining than what we're experiencing here. I hope, anyway. Okay, I'm going to send this back over to OWC. And we're going to say, okay, new session, because that's not working. All right. Audio hardware. Thank you for hanging in there with us, you live chat room people. You.
Oh, yes. Oh, by the way, Blade Runner 2049 yesterday.
I heard Blade Runner 2049. You went and saw it yesterday, you said?
Yeah, I watched it yesterday.
Uh-huh.
What a great movie. I mean, I'm a fan
Mm-hmm.
of the original. I expected it to be nearly as good as it was, but it was just brilliant.
Excellent. My son saw it and he loved it.
Yeah.
But he's a big fan of the original Blade Runner.
Very atmospheric, beautifully filmed. You know, the computer images of this futuristic city were just stunning.
Cool. Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Okay, I got that recording. I saw some action from the Hangout on Air. Let me just do this. Okay, it's recording the iPad.
Sounds good.
That's good. And so let me get that recorded. Okay, that's going. Well, this is going to be interesting with all our technical challenges. It's always interesting. It's always technically challenging. Is it not?
Oh, always lovely.
Okay.
Time
Yes?
in Madrid.
Pardon me?
I was just wondering from Fred what the time in Madrid was.
He's not in Madrid.
I'm in Barcelona, Nick, but I think it's the same time. It's 15:51.
Oh, okay. Barcelona. Fair enough.
I
Isn't that
think.
where
I think.
Freddie
I'm pretty
Mercury
sure.
sang about the football or something.
Okay. Well, we're going to give this a try. I'm not sure how successful we're going to be. Especially with Nick's really. Actually, I think I have better bandwidth than Nick has this week. What do you think, Fred?
Yeah.
Is mine coming
Yours
in
is
okay?
crystal clear. Both your video and your audio, to me, anyways, is fine.
Excellent.
Haven't missed a beat.
Wow. That's unusual. Okay. Oh. All right. Let's see here. I'm going to bring the volume up a little bit there, and we're recording there. We're recording on Audition. So let's do this. We're 298. By the way, if you're watching the video here, what we're doing, because we're doing the 300th anniversary recording and party and celebration on the 25th of this month, we had to actually make it work out. So we have to do 2 episodes between now and Saturday the 25th. So that's why we're recording this on Tuesday morning of this week. And then just 2 days from now, Thursday afternoon, we're going to record again. And that'll be episode 299. And we'll release that one probably early Thanksgiving week. And then we'll record the 300th on Saturday the 25th, if that makes any sense. So that's why you're getting 2 live recordings this week on the APG. Maybe, if we can get this one accomplished. Okay, with that, here, let me turn the gate back on for me so you don't have to... Looks like they've moved on. The scrapers have moved on. They're 1 story above me. So that's good. All right. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 298. Hello, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 404 in the Hilton Recording Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. In this episode, 2 out of 4 taken out in an RJ-85 incident, a serious 737 upset, the pilot shortage hits flight instructor ranks, more news, your feedback, and the latest Plain Tales installment, Billy Barker. So get all settled in, tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 298 is ready for pushback. Hello everyone and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast and I am a captain for a major legacy airline here in the US of A. And joining me from this side of the pond, down in beautiful tropical Miami, Florida. Good point. That was just a rehearsal.
I thought you might just go out to hell with it.
Yeah, I probably would have if I didn't see that message. Yeah, Nick just texted me. It says, "Are we going to clap?" Okay, here we go. Clap. No. Okay. Good point. That's for coordination and synchronization purposes. I guess we should do our little clapping. Okay. Are we ready? We're going to do 3, 2, 1, clap. Okay, here we go. 3, 2, 1, clap. That's about the worst latency I've ever heard. But that's okay. It'll work out. It always does. Okay. Here we go. Airline Pilot Guy, episode 298.
Flight 209, you are cleared for takeoff. Roger. 123.9.
Hello, you're listening to the Airline Pilot Guy Show, the view from our side of the cockpit door. I'm Captain Jeff, your host, broadcasting live from Studio 404 in the Hilton Recording Studios in Wilmington, North Carolina. In today's episode, 2 out of 4 engines taken out in an RJ-85 incident, a serious 737 upset, the pilot shortage hits flight instructor ranks, more news, your feedback, and the latest Plane Tales installment, Billy Barker. So get all settled in. Tray tables and seat backs in their upright and locked positions, electronic devices powered on. Flight 298 is ready for pushback. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Airline Pilot Guy Show. It's an aviation podcast. And I am a captain for a major U.S. legacy carrier. And joining me, a former RAF and RAAF fighter pilot, professional photographer, currently wide-body captain for a European carrier. This week with us on this side of the pond in Miami, Florida, Captain Nick Anderson.
Well, hi there, Jeff. This is going to be very frustrating, I'm sure. My internet connection here at the Confidante Hotel on Collins in my mid-beach area is not brilliant. So I hope it'll be sufficient to do the show. But sometimes you just have to take what you can get.
Yes. I'm not confidente in the bandwidth today.
Exactly right. But it is now a lovely day in Miami. Last couple of days have been a bit rainy. It's blowing a gale out there, mind you. We made the mistake of having breakfast out on the patio. And when my bowl of cereal went flying off the table, I thought better of it.
Little breezy. Oh, that's a shame. All right. Well, also, we have a special guest joining us today, and we have our special guest music there, the Trollolo Man. This person is joining us from Barcelona, Catalonia, Spain. We're not sure about all that. No, we are sure he is joining us from Barcelona. He is a certificated private pilot, and he is checked out in, I think, more than 15 different aircraft types, including a seaplane rating. And we all know him as Fred Sampson.
Hey guys, hey Jeff, hey Nick, happy to be here today. It's a beautiful day in Spain, Catalonia. Well, we're not quite sure, but it's beautiful, and it's gonna be a fun show. Nick, we'll work through the bandwidth issues and we'll have some fun.
Yeah. Oh, you know what I was going to say? I forgot to add at the very end of that, international man of intrigue, for your intro there, Fred.
I should get that as my lower third one.
It really should. because, Fred is everywhere. Just an amazing person. Oh, yeah. I forgot to mention that you are also a very accomplished, pretty serious, what they call it, FPV drone pilot.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. FPV drone pilot, racer, and
have you been doing that much lately? I know that we've watched you do your handiwork with those little tiny drones over there in Northern California. Are you still able to keep your hand in that, or what?
Yeah, I still fly by once a week. I'm hoping to get back as my schedule gets more regular. Hoping to get back to flying. But the thing with drones that I don't think people understand is you fly until you break something. And so the bandwidth you need is the night before or the weekend before when you're fixing stuff and building things. Then you go out, you fly, you break something, and you do it again.
So I guess breaking things is a pretty common thing.
Oh yeah, if we bring three or four drones with us, and we stop flying when they're all broken, and we go home, we fix them, and we do it again.
Oh, cool. Anyway,
so unlike having a girlfriend, breaking up is hard to do, but not for a drone pilot.
Yeah, the intersection of drone pilots and people who have girlfriends, Nick, is a very small. In the Venn diagram, it's very small.
The Venn diagram. So you can tell that Fred has a little bit of a technical background. Throwing in Venn diagrams. Come on, this is an aviation show. We don't do that stuff here. So, catch us up a little bit about what's been going on with you, Fred.
Well, I've got a new. So my new goal of my flying career is to provide Nick with fun airplanes to fly when he comes to San Francisco. And so I've been working on a checkout in something called the Great Lakes, which is a open tandem, open cockpit biplane. This one's good. It's one of the we call it the Pepsi. It's a red, white, and blue. Has a 0360 in it, which is a nice engine, but it has little idiosyncrasies. It has, it's a little bit old, so it's got heel brakes and lots of little things to get around. So maybe another 5-6 hours, and I'll be checked out in the airplane. But it's definitely a different experience.
Why would they put the brakes on the heel and not the toe?
That's how they used to come. This one's from the 70s. Okay. And I guess like everything else, the toe brakes were an innovation at some point. But they've kept the airplane pretty much original. So this one has heel brakes, and it takes a little bit of time to master those, especially when you're here, when you're used to toe brakes.
Yeah, I would imagine that it would be a little confusing.
That sounds like brilliant fun, Fred. What's it like having your hair blowing in the breeze?
It's real fun. You have to wear a little hat, a little Snoopy hat with to keep the headset from flying off. That's mostly because we don't have that many headsets, and we don't want to give you a new one every time. But the airplane is fully aerobatic, Nick, which is really fun. Hanging upside down with your head in the airstream, and the weather here, or not here in Spain, but the weather in California is still good enough to fly in the open cockpit biplane. So it's real fun.
Wow. And so work and not pleasure brings you to Barcelona, I assume?
Mm-hmm. Here for work this week, back home tomorrow. And then I think the next one is APG 300. So I think I'm home for the weekend, and then I go to Atlanta the weekend after.
Yeah, we're looking forward to seeing you in person, Fred.
It's going to be fun. And yeah, I might bring some drones. We'll have a little fun in
oh, yeah.
house. Yeah.
Let's do that. Yeah, and a lot of batteries.
We can charge, but a lot of batteries and a spare pair of goggles so we can take people out for some FPV rides. That should be fun.
Oh, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
A lot of fun. Okay. And well, since Fred just mentioned it, let's not forget that the milestone of 300 episodes is coming up in, let's see, is that less than 2 weeks, I think now? Yeah. So next week is Thanksgiving week, and we're doing it on Thanksgiving Saturday, the 25th of November at Dana's Place in Smyrna, Georgia. And if you're interested, you're in the area, you have nothing else to do, and you want to join us for the live recording / pigging out on fantastic barbecue cooked by Dana on the Big Green Egg, and of course I'm pretty sure there'll be some alcoholic beverages there as well. Please RSVP by sending us an email to 300@airlinepilotguy.com. Again, that's 300@airlinepilotguy.com, and that way we'll have some idea of how many are going to make it for our celebration, and we're really looking forward to that. Also, if you're listening to this right now, it's episode 298. We're recording on Tuesday, what day is today? The 14th of November. And on Thursday, in just 2 days, we're going to record episode 299 so that we can all fit these things in and it'll work out. So we're actually doing episode 300 on Saturday, the 25th. And so this episode hopefully will be out later this week, and then the one we record on Thursday will be out next week sometime. So hope that makes some sense. Nick, so you're down in Miami, obviously on another trip. I'm assuming you're not on a vacation or a holiday. And tell us what's been going on with you, other than a lot of flying, apparently.
No, that's about it, Jeff. Really, it's just trip after trip at the moment. We've got yet more of missionary unusable. So again, we're picking up more flights, and I'm literally after this flight, which is a 4-day trip for me. I've only got 2 days at home, 48 hours, and then I'm off out to San Francisco. And then a little bit of a break, which I'm using, of course, to come across to Atlanta. So if I arrive with black rings under my eyes and not knowing which planet I'm on, yeah, I hope you'll understand.
Well, we're used to that, Nick.
Yeah,
wow.
Very true. But no, things are just way too busy at the moment for comfort. But, hopefully it'll be not last more than a few months, and those Boeings will start getting airborne again. It would be nice.
Yeah, it's kind of throwing a wrench a little bit into your schedule, I see.
Yeah, it certainly is. But there you go. It's all part and airline pilot. You have to take the rough with the smooth sometimes.
That's right. Okay, let's see. Last week I was on a 4-day that I picked up, and I believe that's when we recorded episode 297. I only had a day off. I had Sunday off, and so that was nice to be able to kind of unpack and repack, and also watch the Formula One race in Brazil. Yes, I'm now a Formula One fan, and really enjoyed that race. And then while I was watching the race, I was packing again for this trip. Just left yesterday late morning, and I'm here in Wilmington, and I'm off all day today, so that's nice. And then I'll be home on Thursday afternoon, just in time to unpack the gear and get it set up for episode 299. So that you're caught up now. I didn't really do a lot.
Yeah, brilliant. Jeff, who won the F1? Because I didn't get to see it. I was busy flying out.
It was the German Vettel.
Oh, Vettel.
Mm-hmm. And
how did Hamilton do the back of the grid? Didn't he?
He ended up almost on the podium. He finished fourth.
Oh, excellent job.
Yeah, he did a fantastic job. He's actually started from the pit lanes. So, even further back from the back part of the grid, and worked his way all the way up to 4. And he was getting very close to overtaking Raikkonen for the third spot on the podium, but not quite. The tires ran out for him. So good race, though. Good race.
Excellent.
All right.
Shame I missed it.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure you can find a recording of it somewhere. All right. Let's see. Oh, it is November, and something we call also Movember. And let me play a quick recording of First Officer Craig. He came up with this idea to get involved with the fundraising for men's health. And take it away, First Officer Craig.
Hey APGers, it's FO Craig here. As most of you know, month of October, which it currently is right now, a lot of people you maybe see around are wearing pink for Breast Cancer Awareness Month, and that's a great thing, and I help support it by wearing a pink tie and pink epaulets on the flight line. I also have donated a little bit of funds to breast cancer awareness research and whatnot. So with November coming up, November is Men's Health Awareness Month, as far as just general men's health, testicular cancer, prostate cancer. And so with Captain Jeff's blessing, I went ahead and started Captain Jeff's Mustache Crew with a company called Movember Foundation. And what they do is they support and raise awareness and research of general men's health, testicular and prostate cancer by you can donate money as well as just show pride. Like in October you wear pink for breast cancer awareness. In November you can do a no shave November or a Movember and grow out a mustache or facial hair or whatever what kind of facial hair trimmings you'd like to do. I plan to grow out my best Captain Jeff mustache. I don't think I'll be as good as his, but I'll definitely give it my best try. I'll give this link to Captain Jeff to put in the show notes, but it is https /mo/captain-jeff-s-mustache-crew. And again, I'll have Captain Jeff put that in the show notes. And it's a team that I created for all the APG community, for those males who want to grow out the facial hair. I don't know, maybe we got some females that want to do that too. But if you can create your own kind of page on this website and post a picture of your mustache or your progress throughout the month of November, and you can also donate money. For the Captain Jeff's Mustache Crew, I set the mark at $1,000. I already donated $10 to help kind of get this thing moving. So feel free to reach out to Captain Jeff and he can forward it to me, or feel free to reach out to me for more information. I'm at Greenhorn CFI on Twitter, or FO Craig. I'm Craig Pizek on Facebook, and so just feel free to reach out or to me or Captain Jeff. And if the link doesn't work for some reason, or if got any questions, I hope that we can get a good group of people to join this, and love to see what everybody's best impersonation of Captain Jeff's mustache is. Thanks for listening. Great job on the show, guys. I love it, and just looking forward. You're coming up on 300 episodes. Looking forward to another 300. So this is FO Craig signing out. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thank you, FO Craig. Those new iPhone 10 animations, emoticon animations? I wonder if they have like just a mustache, and then we could do like an actual animated Captain Jeff's mustache. No, not a good idea. Let's see. We on the screen here, I'm hoping that everybody can see that if you're watching the video. That is a picture of FO Craig, and looks like he is growing a pretty nice looking mustache there, I'd say. Although it's a brown mustache or a brunette, not a gray or white mustache like mine. So he's going to have to put some dye or something on it to make it look like mine.
Shoe polish, or actually the wife's mascara works pretty well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. Oh, you mean I should change mine to make it dark, or he should? Oh, never mind. Doesn't make any difference.
Jeff needs to go white. That's fine.
Yeah. Let's see. So right now, it looks like I'm looking at the Captain Jeff's Mustache Crew page on the Movember Foundation. Looks like we're up to $210 funds raised, and Steph even got involved there, and not with the facial hair, but with the donations. Thank you, Steph, for your donation. Ken McCrory is also participating. Thank you very much from you, Ken, and Craig, of course, and myself. And if you want to become involved in this, again, we'll have the link in the show notes, and you can become part of Captain Jeff's Mustache Crew. So thank you a lot, First Officer Craig, for that. And now it's time for the Coffee Fund.
Johnny, how much more coffee?
No thanks.
I love coffee, I love tea, I love the Java jive and it loves me. Coffee and tea and the Java and me. A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. All right, the Coffee Fund is your way to support the show financially. Now, interestingly, a lot of you listening to the show live right now are part of the Coffee Fund cadre, and many of you listening to the audio right now are as well. But did you know that less than 1% of the folks listening to the show actually participate in the Coffee Fund cadre? And I just might ask you to consider, if you have some extra change lying around and you want to support the show and continue motivating us to do it, please consider joining us on the Coffee Fund cadre. And again, that's the Coffee Fund, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. And since the last episode, I don't think we had, it's not too long since we did our last episode. So we don't have any Coffee Fund Classic donations since then, but we do have a couple new patrons via patreon.com. And they are John Hyde and Matej Balantik. Matej, M-A-T-E-J. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that correctly or not, but we do appreciate your pledges. New producers from or for the Airline Pilot Guy show. And again, if you want to learn more about how you can become part of the Coffee Fund cadre and get those periodic crew logs that we put out there, Captain Nick, actually 3 of them since the last show. So a very prolific producer of crew logs in the recent days. And anyway, we would really appreciate it if you'd consider joining us. Again, we always say, if you need your money for food and for shelter and for, well, most importantly, flying lessons, renting airplanes, that kind of stuff, well, don't give us that money. You need to spend it on the important stuff. But again, Coffee Fund, airlinepilotguy.com/coffee. Thanks everyone for your generous contributions.
A cup, a cup, a cup, a cup. Boy.
Stand by for news.
What is it with the Russians and the Boeing 737? You might ask. I know I do. Russian investigators have detailed a serious loss of control incident last month involving a UTAIR, U-T-A-I-R, I'm supposing that that's the way you pronounce it, UTAIR or UTAIR, Boeing 737-500 on approach to Moscow's Vnukovo Airport. Federal Air Transport Regulator has revealed that the aircraft was subjected to excessive pitch up to 45 degrees and a bank of 95 degrees before the crew regained control. The aircraft had been following a precision approach to runway 6 after a service from Krasnodar on the 13th of October. Rosaviatsia states, I think that's their investigative agency, states that the conditions were overcast with a cloud base of just 60 meters and that the aircraft was in cloud and out of sight of ground. The aircraft was following an arrival pattern which involved passing this IBTER waypoint southwest of the airport at a height of 600 meters before turning right to align with the runway and descending to 400 meters by the final approach point. Rosaviatsia says this turn and descent were conducted with the autopilot and auto throttle engaged, the landing gear deployed, and the flaps set at 15 degrees. The engines were operating at 35 to 40% of their N1 level. After the turn, the aircraft leveled at 400 meters, but its pitch started increasing to 10 degrees, and airspeed declined to 133 to 135 knots. The auto throttle raised the thrust level to 75% of N1. As the 737 approached the entry point to the glide path at around 130 knots, the crew extended the flaps to 30 degrees and the autopilot disengaged. Now, I'm not sure if they intended for it to disengage. I'm guessing not. It just disengaged on its own, I believe. Rosa Viazia says the engine thrust setting had increased further by this point to 95% of N1, and this power setting, combined with an increasing pitch of 19 degrees, that's high, folks, resulted in the jet entering a smooth climb, they put in quotes, while the airspeed declined to 128 knots. The pilot's control column, it states, was pushed nose down, thrust levers were pulled back to a lower power setting, but without a disconnection of the auto throttles. Pitch continued to increase to a maximum of 45 degrees, nose high, and airspeed bled away to less than 100 knots, triggering a stick shaker alert. The inquiry says the control column registered alternating deflection, and the aircraft experienced banks of up to 95%. After the jet reached the maximum pitch, the control column was pushed forward and remained this way until the aircraft emerged from the upset. It had climbed to a height of 750 meters during the event, and once the crew regained control, the aircraft executed a go-around at 350 meters. The second approach was uneventful. Rosa Viazia says that despite the excessive operating parameters, the aircraft did not breach loading and speed limits for its configuration. None of the 111 passengers and 5 crew members were injured, and the jet was undamaged. Investigators are still analyzing the circumstances of this incident, which took place in daylight at around 9:17 local time in the morning. So this sounds a lot to me like a couple of these incidents that resulted in accidents and crashes and great loss of life in the past. And again, involving operators from this part of the world and operating that particular type of airplane. And I was reading through this thinking, oh my gosh, I mean, this was that close to another huge loss of life and, you know, a serious aircraft accident. And so what's going on here? Are people just not paying attention to what is happening with the automation, autoflight system? That's what I'm suspecting.
I don't know, Jeff. The weather was, I mean, I think the minima for this approach were something like 800 meters, and that was the ability. It was a pretty foul day in snow, so not brilliant conditions. So the guy should have been really glued to his. I suspect perhaps he was trying to fly some of this visually and not instrument flying very well, and he got disorientated. That's guess.
Yeah. You know, I'm thinking that now, you know, it's perfectly normal and common for people to operate, you know, the auto flight system and the auto throttle, auto thrust system. They work in conjunction with each other, but they're not necessarily, you know, tied together. And you can operate the airplane, manually flying the airplane, and continue to leave the auto throttle system on, which is very common practice. But I'm thinking that maybe the crew lost sight of what the auto throttle system was doing, and weren't paying close attention to their airspeed control. I don't know. You know, it's just, was this autopilot disengagement, was that something that took them by surprise? Or did they assume that the autopilot system was still engaged, perhaps? And then that's how the pitch got all out of whack? I don't know. It's just, I'm scratching my head on this one. It doesn't make a lot of sense.
It could be, but the auto thrust was trying to do its thing. It was bringing the power up when they were at very low speed, but they were manually overriding it and pulling the thrust levers back again. So I don't understand the logic there either.
Yeah, I think that there was some kind of confusion in the human brain and the autoflight automation system, and they were on different pages and weren't quite understanding what the airplane was doing. And as I always say, you know, if you really have no idea what the autoflight system is doing or the auto thrust system is doing, then just turn everything off and fly the airplane, because gosh darn it, we're pilots and we know how to fly and we know how to keep an airplane under control, I'm hoping. So why they didn't do that in this case is a mystery to me. I don't know. Fred, do you have any thoughts on this?
I mean, 95 degrees is more upside down than right side up.
Yep.
And at 3,000 feet, I'm just trying to figure out what the energy curve is for that and how close they were from not recovering that airplane. You're in an airliner almost upside down between 1,000 and 300 feet above the ground. Do you guys train for something like that? Do you guys do upset recovery scenarios at those specific attitudes?
We do. In fact, my airline has put a lot of emphasis in the last couple of years because of all these accidents recently of unusual attitudes and aircraft upsets. And we have a procedure, a standard procedure to employ when we're in any kind of an upset situation. And the four-step, basically, upset recovery procedure is designed to basically get you out of any attitude that you might find yourself in. But there are efforts underway to ensure that if you do get yourself into a situation like this upset, that you employ a standard procedure to get you out of it.
And of course, on the Airbus, Fred, envelope protection won't allow you to get into such extreme attitudes, unless, of course, the protection system to you, because the flight control system or the flight control computers have been downgraded to a more basic level following a failure. But the fact that we have all these protections, we still practice unusual attitudes, recovery from jet upsets. In fact, we've got training ongoing all the time, even when I'm not in the simulator. In fact, got to finish phase 3 of the current training program on my computer before the end of the month. So just remind me, guys, I need to do that.
Don't forget to do that.
We'll text you, Nick.
Can you do that on your flight over from London to Atlanta?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea. I'll be at the back of some horrible 757, I expect, being deafened. So it'll give me something to do.
Okay. Don't forget your hearing protection.
Thank you. I'll need more than hearing protection if I have to get on that thing.
So you make a good point. Airbus has designed airplanes so that the protection envelope should keep you from getting into any kind of unusual attitude and upset situation like this. However, there's the rub. If these protection systems are not working, you still have to know how to get out of it as a pilot. And we've seen several instances in the last couple of decades where the protections were gone and people ended up getting into serious trouble. So we just have to put more emphasis on, first of all, not getting into these situations to begin with, understanding automation. And but if you find yourself in a situation, then know how to recover from it. And apparently, with success this time, it was a recovery situation and not an accident. So,
but just there by the grace of God, it was damn close.
Yeah, it was close, very close.
I mean, we can recover an aerobatic airplane at about 1,000 feet. A Cessna, a 3,000 feet. I would, yeah, this is really, really close.
Too close. Okay. Speaking of close, here's an interesting incident that occurred, and the crew did a fantastic job recovering from this. An SA Airline Avro RJ85. I think it's also, isn't that the BA 146 as well? I think that's just like a different.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the Avro ones I think are built in Canada, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. The high wing 4-engine regional airliner. So many of you probably know what that is. Was flying from Harare in Zimbabwe to Johannesburg, South Africa, with 34 passengers, 4 crew. Was en route nearing the top of descent towards Johannesburg when the number 2 engine, an LF507 inboard left hand, suffered an uncontained failure, ejecting parts of the hot section and turbine towards the number 1 engine, which is the outboard on the left side, causing that engine to fail too. Wow. The aircraft continued to Johannesburg, was vectored for an approach to runway 21 right, while other aircraft were pulled off the approaches to runway. Oh, they were using the runways 3 but they came in to 2-1 right, obviously an emergency situation, and they pulled all the aircraft who were on approach to runway 3 off of those approaches and moved out of the way so the airplane could get on the ground as quickly as possible. Said they landed without further incident, vacated onto taxiway Lima, taxied to the apron, followed by emergency services awaiting the aircraft. The airline reported all passengers remain uninjured and wrote, quote, while en route, one of the 4 engines suffered an uncontained failure, which then caused damage to its adjacent engine. Upon assessing the damage and status of the aircraft, the crew elected to continue to Johannesburg, where it landed safely under the power of its remaining 2 engines. At no point was the safety of the passengers or crew in jeopardy. So this was a job well done by this air crew, because anytime you have, and Captain Nick can definitely attest to this, because he routinely flies 4-engine aircraft, and when you lose 1 engine, that's not a good thing. You lose 2 engines, it's not a good thing either, a much worse thing. And then when they're both on the same side, that's when you're really in deep doo-doo, I'd say. What do you think, Captain Nick?
Well, absolutely, Jeff. I mean, it is the equivalent of a single engine failure in a twin engine on one wing, but it's not something you expect and regularly train for on a 4-engine airplane. So we do practice 2-engine work in the 340, but because it's a very remote possibility, it's not something that comes around very often, and it's never easy. You're really worried about when they both fail on the same side of not having enough rudder control if you need to go around power on, because that is one of your limiting factors. You have to keep the approach speed up so that you've got enough rudder authority to counter all that you're going to put in on just on one side. And because of the very limited performance on 2 engines, you've got this 2 dead pods hanging on the wing, creating an enormous amount of drag. We have a relatively high visual committal height of around 500 feet. So from that height onwards, you really are committed to land, and a go around below that height is very dangerous. So it would add extreme of circumstances. So yep, when we do these, it's thought about and planned some distance out, set up an approach, and once you're below 500 feet, that's it. Your only real aim now is to somehow get the airplane safely onto the runway, and air traffic don't do anything stupid like the simulator instructors do, which is to taxi a fire truck onto the middle of the runway or something and a low level go around. I mean, so from 500 feet on, all you're interested now is coming below your VMCA 2, which is the minimum speed on 2 engines, back down to your landing speed, so you stand a chance of stopping before the end of the runway.
So that would be the most critical aspect of an approach with 2 engines out on the same side?
Absolutely, yeah. That last 500 feet is where it's all about. I mean, getting the approach set up and making sure you never get slow, because we talk about being on the wrong side of the drag curve. Well, it's very easy to do when you're on 2 engines, so that you end up getting a little bit slow. The amount of drag builds up very quickly, and you don't really want to have to bring those full power, because the aircraft then becomes very hard to control. So you're always trying to keep available to you. Don't want to put flaps out to gear down too early, but then if you leave it all a bit late and you end up very fast, you suffer the problems then of trying to stop the machine on the runway if you don't have a very long runway to land on.
Excellent. Well, this crew looks like they did a fantastic job, so our hats are off to them and their performance of their crew duties.
Yeah, it's a great little airplane, and you know, I always thought those 4 APUs, little hair dries, they're tiny little engines, but you know, it still makes a big difference when you take 2 of them away.
Yeah, I'd say probably 50% less power.
In fact, I think they're modified helicopter engines from memory. I'm not absolutely certain about that. Someone could probably tell me.
Yeah, they were saying they were, what was the designation of the engine? LF507s. I'm not sure I've ever heard of those. I'm not sure who manufactures them, but.
I've seen APUs bigger than that.
Yeah. And I guess apparently these engines also are problematic when it comes to bleed air extraction and the bleed air. It seems like a lot of incidents of toxic aero syndrome or aerotoxic syndrome involve a lot of these BA 146/RJ 85s and this particular engine and plumbing. I think I'm right about that. But
yeah, I think you're right.
Yeah,
too.
anyway.
I think they don't have the best oil seals in the world.
Ah. Oh, there you go. Got to have the seal. Thank you for that, Captain Nick. All right, moving on. Let's see. Another 4-engined aircraft incident. This occurred, it was a My Cargo. Not My Cargo, your cargo? No, My Cargo, MYCARGO, 747-400 at Maastricht on November 11th, 2017. Runway excursion on takeoff. This from the Aviation Herald. A My Cargo Airlines 747-400 freighter on behalf of Saudi Cargo Airlines, registration blah, 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 was flying from Maastricht, I don't know, I'm butchering that, Netherlands to Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, was accelerating for takeoff from runway 21, and when the crew rejected takeoff at low speed and deployed the thrust reversers, the aircraft veered right off the runway, came to a stop with all gear on soft ground to the right of the runway, about 450 meters past the displaced runway threshold, and about 630 meters after the beginning of the takeoff run, about abeam the aiming markers runway 21. There were no injuries. The aircraft received minor, if any, damage. The Saudi Cargo's parent company, Saudi Arabian Airlines, reported the aircraft suffered an engine problem causing the runway excursion while attempting to take off. There were no injuries and no damage. The Dutch DSB reported they opened an investigation into the runway excursion of a cargo aircraft at the Maastricht airport. And let's see, I was thinking, 747 cargo. I wish we had an APG co-host that flew that particular airplane and could comment on what he thought may have happened. Oh, wait a minute. Hang on. We do have one. His name, Miami Rick, and he did a Periscope, a Twitter audio-video recording regarding this incident, and I'm sure that I have his permission to play the audio portion of this on the show. And in fact, I know for sure that we do. So take it away, Miami Rick.
All right, so as promised, I'm going to tell you guys and gals what I think happened with that 7-4. Don't have a lot of time because I got to get ready. Going to London later today. And so anyway, let's go right into it. So the other day, a 7-4 went off the side of the runway there at Maastricht, which is that same airport where it was the 2-3 days ago. And I think I parked right next to that very same 7-4. And so, well, how can you end up off the side of the runway? And it's very simple. So a lot of people think that it's actually harder to deal with a takeoff reject scenario at high speed versus low speed. And actually, it works the other way. It's actually harder to deal, at least in a 4-engine airplane, it's actually harder to deal with a takeoff reject maneuver at low speed versus high speed. And that is because, and I bet you didn't know this, or well, I bet you did, but you didn't really kind of put 2 and 2 together. It's a lot harder to keep directional control at low speed versus high speed. And here's why. The rudder, which is the movable part of the vertical stabilizer on any airplane, that doesn't become effective till about 80 knots. Aerodynamically effective, that is. And so the only thing you have to keep you going straight down the runway is nose wheel steering. Now, how does that work? How do you steer an airplane on the ground? So on the ground, an airplane behaves a lot like a car. So you have, a set of steerable wheels at the front of the jet that you actuate via a steering tiller that's either to the right or the left, right next to each pilot position. And that steering tiller gives you about 70 degrees of steering authority, right, on the ground. And so you are cleared of taxiing to the runway. So you're driving around the airport. You get on the runway. You're clear to line up and wait. You're now pointed straight down the runway, and you're waiting on your takeoff clearance. Now, you're done steering for the day, right? Because you're already there. So you're clear for takeoff. And now, what you're going to do to keep the aircraft going straight down the runway is you're now going to use your rudder pedals. Now, the rudder pedals do two things. One, clearly control the rudder in the back of the airplane. And then two, give you about 7 degrees of steering authority on the nose wheel. And this is on the 747. And don't mind the TV, I'm keeping up with the Kardashians. No, I'm not. Just kidding. Nobody watches that crap. So anyway, you're clear for takeoff. And when you are going down the runway now, you're steering the airplane with just 7 degrees of steering authority right and left. Okay, so that's how the steering works, right? Second aspect of this situation here. Aircraft that have 4 engines, i.e. the 747, you know, the square bus 340s, 380s, and the like. If you have an outboard engine failure at low speed, that is very, very critical indeed, because if you lose an outboard and then the other outboard is at full takeoff thrust, then that moment arm from the side that has the outboard working versus the side that doesn't is going to have, that moment arm is going to be a lot bigger on the side on the side that has the 2 working engines versus the side that only has the 1 engine working, right? And so take that into account and add that to the fact that you don't have a lot of control authority or, directional control authority, and that yaw moment is very, very hard to deal with. And so I think that's kind of what happened here. Now, why did it end off to the side of the runway there? On the 747, and this is one of those quirks that you have to be aware of when you're flying this thing. The way the auto throttle system works in the 747, and basically every other Boeing I've ever flown, when you select takeoff thrust, I don't know if you ever noticed this, but just about on any jet, the thrust will come up to about halfway, and it'll be there. It'll stay there for a little bit, and then it'll go up to full takeoff thrust, right? And the reason behind that is because you want to make sure that when you go to full takeoff thrust, all engines spool up together. So you get to, all 4 engines or all 2 engines or however many engines you have on your jet, they all come up to takeoff thrust together, right? To prevent any loss of directional control, in this kind of situation. So on the 747, you will bring your thrust levers to about 60% in one, so just about halfway up. You'll wait for the engine to stabilize, and then you'll hit a little button on the front of the takeoff of the thrust lever of the quadrant there. You hit a button there. It's called the toga switch. Not toga as in Roman toga, but toga as in takeoff go around, right? So you hit that button there, and the thrust levers will go up to the pre-selected takeoff thrust setting that you figured out before departure based on your takeoff performance data. So the engines will come up and spool up to takeoff thrust together, right? And you'll start going on down the runway. When you hit that button, the thrust levers will physically move up by themselves. So you hit that button, you can let go, and the thrust levers will go up and basically park themselves on the quadrant, basically physically park themselves at the position where takeoff thrust is based on your pre-selected value. And they'll stay there. The problem is that the servos that moved the thrust levers to that position remain engaged, right? And so if you are to bring or move the thrust levers aft, they will return to that pre-selected position up until you get to 80 knots. And that's why on that tweet I put out a couple hours ago, or I don't know how long ago it was, I pointed that little yellow arrow to that little paddle switch, and there's 2 of them. There's one on the left, one on the right, one for each pilot. And that little paddle switch, what that does is that when you push that forward, it'll disengage the auto throttle. It's basically what that'll do is it'll disconnect the servo from the thrust lever, right? So now you're free to move and put that thrust lever wherever it is that you want it. And so the procedure for a low speed takeoff reject scenario is to keep your thumb on the auto throttle disconnect paddle until 80 knots. Once you get to 80 knots, you can move your thumb away. Because if you have an engine failure below 80 knots and you bring the thrust levers back to idle, and you move your hand forward to try to engage the thrust reversers, by the time you let go of the thrust levers and you move your hand to go and reach over to the thrust reverse levers there to actuate those, the thrust levers will move back up away from the idle detent. And you cannot physically engage with thrust reversers until the throttle quadrant is at the idle detent. You can't go to a reverse interlock. And so what you do is you disconnect the auto throttle, bring them to idle, and then that way the thrust levers stay there, and you're able to bring the thrust reversers up to the interlock, and then obviously deploy them, and then bring the speed brake up manually. But the speed brake is another thing, and it should deploy automatically. So basically, that's it. If you forget to disconnect the auto throttle, thrust levers will come back up. You're below 80 knots. Rudder is not effective. You don't have a lot of directional control. You don't have a lot of aerodynamic control on the rudder because you're still going pretty slow. And you have to keep in mind that a lot of these runways are only 150, 148 feet wide. And the wheelbase on the 7.4 is 42 feet. Just shy of 42 feet. So you have about, 50 feet to each side, which is not a lot. So if you're not careful, and if you're not following that procedure, keeping your thumb where it should be, and you're, all of a sudden this thing happens, and you don't react quickly enough, you'll end up off the side of the runway. And that is what happened, boys and girls. Well, at least I think. All right, that's it from Huntsville. I got to get to ironing my shirt so I look nice and crisp, and I'll see you all on the other side of the pond. Later.
That was the incomparable Miami Rick. And now I'm finally going to play this. There we go. Oh, we miss you, man.
Breed of Ricket, that is.
So
what was the question again?
I don't know, what were we talking about? I'm not really sure. But it was good to see it. By the way, I'll put a link to that in the show notes. You can watch the actual video of Rick in his hotel studio in Huntsville as he recorded that. And hey, we'll take what we can get from Rick, and if it means stealing his Periscope audio video, then it's what we got to do. So.
Yeah. But this is the point where I actually say that this is where Airbus got things right on our aircraft, because rather than having to fiddle around with toga buttons and autopilot disconnects and auto thrust disconnects, critical phases, we just moved the thrust levers. So, it's just so instinctive and so simple in comparison that these problems are much less common. We face all the same problems of the aircraft swinging if you get a low speed abort with an engine failure. But all you do is levers closed, that disconnects the auto thrust automatically, and now you've got control over immediately. They all come back to idle. You can pull as much thrust reverse as you think you need, but in the low speed cases, as soon as you've killed that thrust, swinging, you can straighten it up on the nose wheel, steering through the rudder pedals, and problem solved. So, yeah. I realize that the 7.4 is a previous generation, but those little intricacies in handling the auto thrust to me seem way overly complicated.
Yeah, but it actually, in the description of it, it sounds complicated, but actually in practical circumstances, it's just like almost an instinctive thing for most of us. Apparently not in this case, but it should be an instinctive thing. You pull the power back, and at the same time you're doing that, you're hitting that auto throttle disconnect button so that the throttles stay back. And I agree with you, Nick. I'm not sure exactly why you would want to use reverse thrust in a low speed abort situation, because as you mentioned, as soon as you pull the power back, you are now have symmetrical thrust situation, and you're using your braking, which should be more than enough to stop the airplane safely and timely. I think, going into reverse thrust with an engine failure, now you're just kind of exacerbating the problem.
Yeah, you're right. I suspect it was perhaps a little bit of startle. They probably, I don't know if they were going off at an odd time of the day. Body clock's pretty lousy, and they probably did instinctive maneuvers. And I just closed the thrust levers, grabbed all the reversers. Perhaps they did or didn't connect that auto thrust and got themselves in a muddle. But for a low speed abort, it's a very calm thing to do. We really just close the thrust levers below 70 odd or 80 knots, because usually there's not actually a problem with stopping the airplane. The only problem you really got is keeping it on the center line.
Yep, I agree. So hopefully we'll hear more about that.
There you go.
In subsequent days. Maybe we'll learn more about that from the Dutch investigative board. All right.
But a great explanation of the Boeing auto thrust logic from Rick. Thanks, mate.
Yeah, Rick, always good to hear from you. Looking forward to more of that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Moving on. Again, I have a little bit more here in the news folder, and both of these remaining two items are basically the same thing, relating to the pilot shortage. And again, whether you want to call it a pilot shortage or a pilot pay and benefit shortage or whatever, the same result. Airlines are having issues with finding qualified pilots to fly airplanes, and one of the impacts is the fact that airlines are looking to snag the flight instructors out there teaching other pilots how to fly because they have experience, and the airlines need these pilots to fill their cockpits. And so, let me read this article. This is from Chronicle.com. Increasing demand for commercial pilots has increased enrollment in many flight programs in schools across the United States, including those at colleges. And while the programs are adding class sections and planes to their fleets to accommodate the influx of students, they're also losing a key to their business: flight instructors. The combination of a growing airline industry, a coming wave of retirements of major airline pilots, and a demand for regional flights has left airlines scrambling to fill their cockpits and quick to poach flight instructors because of their experience. In an attempt to meet the demand and retain pilots, regional airlines have raised their pay, lathered on bonuses, and extended alliances to flight schools. Plenty of schools have partnerships with major airlines and their regional counterparts, but an unintended consequence of enticing new pilots with job placements, bonuses, and a decent work schedule is the shortage of flight instructors. Anyway, it goes on to talk about what these schools are doing to try to keep or entice their flight instructors to stay on with them, but it's a losing battle, I think, in a lot of cases. So it's kind of like a vicious circle here, where the airlines are clamoring for the qualified pilots, but we need flight instructors out there to teach people how to fly. But the flight instructors are the ones that are getting poached as well.
Yeah, so, inevitable, because after all, most of those flight instructors are trying to get hours to get into the airlines, and when they're given a chance, get them quicker and into a regional, they're going to jump at it. Fred, have you noticed the number of flight instructors?
Sorry, Nick, you're breaking up a little bit. I think you're asking if we had noticed the number of flight instructors. I've seen a lot of new ones, and I think we'll get to it in the next article. But I think especially with the 1,500-hour rule, that there's a lot of flight instructors now in that between 200 and 1,500 range that are just teaching as much as they can to get there, and so they don't tend to last. So we're definitely seeing a higher turnover. And if we're seeing pay increases, that means there really is a shortage, right? That's usually the metric that people look for. Is, it's not the newspaper articles or the tweets. It's really when the pay starts going up, there's actually a shortage. But man, what a great time to learn to fly, or to if you're in that pipeline right now to make that your career, that's those are all very, very good signs.
Yes. So Fred was alluding to this article that I placed with this one regarding the flight instructor poaching. This is from aviationnews.net. Last week, the FAA unveiled an aviation rulemaking committee's long-awaited recommendation to modify the 1,500-hour training requirement for first officers. The 88-page report comes after two separate panels of aviation stakeholders proposed similar recommendations to create alternative pathways for prospective pilots. The AAAE has been urging... Who is the AAAE? Anyway, has been urging Congress and the administration to consider alternative pathways to meet the stringent 1,500-hour requirement in an effort to enhance safety and address the pilot shortage, which is adversely impacting commercial air service to small and medium-sized communities. This report may help bolster efforts to address the pilot shortage on Capitol Hill. The latest recommendations, there are two of them here, to modify the 1,500-hour rule come from the FAA's Air Carrier Training Advisory Rulemaking Committee. That's a mouthful. The ARC is recommending two separate approaches for pilots seeking a restricted airline transport pilot certificate. One would give candidates a uniform 250-hour credit for completing an air carrier enhanced qualification program. This would reduce the flight time requirement for military pilots from 750 hours to 500, for pilots with a bachelor's degree from 1,000 to 750, and for pilots with an associate's degree from 1,250 hours to 1,000. The Airline Pilots Association, which has resisted efforts to create alternative pathways to help pilots meet the 1,500-hour requirement, endorsed this recommendation. The ARC also came up with a more aggressive recommendation to give pilots different levels of credit for completing an air carrier-sponsored training course. This so-called variable credit approach would reduce the requirement for military pilots from 750 to 500, for pilots with a bachelor's degree from 1,000 to 500, and for pilots with an associate's degree from 1,200 hours to 500. Okay, so that's a much more aggressive kind of recommendation. The Regional Airline Association, Airlines for America, Delta Airlines, and other aviation stakeholders on the ARC supported this plan. Proponents argue that pilots with less experience would have more to gain from an air carrier-sponsored training course and should be awarded more credit hours. The Airline Pilots Association and the Air Dispatchers Federation have expressed opposition to this last recommendation. In other words, they think that it's just too drastic a cut from the hour requirements. What do you think about this, Fred?
Okay, Jeff. American Associate of Airport Executives.
Oh, thank you. I don't know why that was not in the article. I didn't see it anywhere. I guess you're just supposed to know that.
Go ahead, Fred.
Why did they get a vote? No, I've always wondered why you couldn't trade. I mean, the whole point of this is to get pilots that are better, that are both better, have more experience, and are both better at decision making. Right? Ultimately, is why this rule was increased. And I never understood why if you could demonstrate that through experience or a training course, why you couldn't trade experience for hours. You know, if you complete certain aerobatic courses, if you complete certain airline training programs, ultimately that's what we're trying to encourage. You know, as a passenger, you know, I'd be really more confident if I knew that a brand new first officer was stepping in the seat of a 737 with 700 hours, but with a clear demonstration of ability, as opposed to somebody that's just been flying a Cessna around in the pattern with students for an extra 1,000 hours. So while that's really good training, good experience, it's not necessarily the same kind of experience that you'd expect a line pilot to have. So this feels like it's going in the right direction. I think there's probably a lot of implementation questions and details, but I just wish there was a way that you could take your pilot resume, your pilot pedigree, and trade more of varied types of experiences into our credits to get to that seat faster.
Yeah. Now, in your part of the world, Nick, they have something called the multi-crew license, or I'm not sure exactly what the exact name of it is, but they are kind of going at it from a different angle.
Yeah, I'm not an expert in this, Jeff. No, if you're going to fly as part of a multi-crew, then you're given dispensation to join that crew as the inexperienced pilot, and you generate a job, so long as you've got an experienced pilot beside you. So that's kind of how they're getting around that. But I think Fred has made a very good point. It's all about quality versus quantity, and I just think putting a 1,500-hour quantity limit to it, because you can fly 1,500 hours straight and level and be not much of a better pilot when you finish than when you started. I think structured training that gives you experience in all the dangerous environments that we fly in, so high level, high angle of attack, upsets, all those kind of edge of the envelope stuff is really where you need to be. And if you've got sufficient training in those areas, the totals should be pared down, because now you've got quality. And the quantity bit, to me, is to a certain extent irrelevant. Of course, you experience just flying the airplane and perhaps experiencing different environments, different weathers, but honestly, there's not much to be gained in 1,500 hours straight and level.
Very good point. You know, the thing that's always kind of frustrated me about this whole thing, and this is in large part due to the aftermath of the Colgan 4507 crash in Buffalo. And I think the big elephant that's in the room that everybody doesn't want you to look at is the fact that a major part of that accident, you know, experience was part of it, although people would argue both of those pilots involved in that accident were actually quite, they had a lot of experience. They had, I think each of them had at least 3,000 hours apiece of air carrier time. And the fatigue was one of the major factors that I'm not sure was adequately addressed, and especially the fact that these were commuters. They were commuting to the job, and both of them had spent a good portion of the day before they started their actual duty time, you know, commuting to work, one all the way from Seattle, Washington. Now, I know a lot of people out there listening, especially you airline pilots, commuters, are saying, Jeff, just shut up. Don't say anything. We don't want you to ruin it for us. And, you know, I'm not a commuter. And so I can, you know, clearly state that that I think that that more should have been done as far as regulatory efforts involved with trying to put some restrictions on, you know, how far you must or how far you can commute, or how much time it takes before you start your crew duty day, et cetera. And they kind of just looked the other way, in my opinion. And I know, send all the bad email to junk@airlinepilotguy.com. And no, I'm just kidding. So I know that
you know,
go ahead.
Sorry, in under EASA rules, you have 75 minutes to get to work. Take longer than that, you are supposed to make well, you're supposed to take a rest before you begin work. Now, that rest is not quantified, but you have to rest before you start flying to make sure that you're fit again. So, you know, when you've got commuting in long distances, it actually then becomes illegal for them to fly without taking a rest period before they get in the airplane and start work. Now, that's the EASA rules, and I personally think that you guys did miss a chance to introduce something similar, perhaps not quite as punitive for a crash.
I agree. And I know that a lot of people would probably disagree with me, but you know, I think that the three major things there was fatigue, competency, and qualifications as far as currency, not currency. You know, how many hours you have, how much experience you have in flying air carrier transports. And I think they did a good job with trying to come up with a certain level of experience as far as hourly requirements, although, as Fred stated, you know, and Captain Nick did as well, that it's more about the quality and not the quantity. But in the competency part, there were some issues with, especially the captain not being the sharpest knife in the drawer, and kind of going from one airline to another, and the airlines didn't know that this person had some issues with some training events in the past and check rides and that kind of thing. So I think they made some good, efforts in the direction of trying to make sure that airlines, know when somebody has certain problems and issues with training and that kind of thing. They've addressed that. But again, that big elephant in the room for me is the commuting thing. And, by the time you start your day, if you've already flown across the country to get to your domicile before you've started your duty, that's just, I don't know. That's a major thing in my mind. So hopefully something will come of that.
I mean, that's even assuming you were rested when you left, and there's someone that travels a lot. Like, I mean, we do this, right? We'll fly, so we'll take a 7-hour flight somewhere, then we'll go right to work, or go right to a customer, or go right to an office, and you're not 100%. And so, and then the over time that takes a bigger toll. So no, I agree, Jeff. I think, and I don't know how you would address something like that, but that was definitely something that was contributing there. But if they do reduce the number of required hours, though, that's going to accentuate that flight instructor problem as well, because now going to have a lot more people that are ready to go that are going to go.
Yeah, they're going to bail.
They're going to bail. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm not sure exactly how this whole issue is going to be resolved, but they're trying. All right. Well, that was the news, and now it's time for the best part of the show: your feedback.
Captain, incoming message.
All right. This first one was interesting. This is sent in from David Harrison from Dewsbury, soon to be relocated to Leeds in Yorkshire. I don't know, how did I do with the pronunciation there, Nick? Oh, is Nick with us anymore?
Sorry, yeah, Leeds. Very good, yes.
Okay, and then Dewsbury?
That's not a hard one.
Okay, no, it's not. But I'm taking whatever I can get.
Dewsbury, yes.
Okay, well, there we go. This from the BBC.com. The article that he references. Hi, Jeff, and the rest of the APG crew. I've just read a story on the BBC News website after a flight from Glasgow to Crete with only one passenger on board. The article states that it's not unusual at the end of the holiday vacation season to carry so few passengers. Does this happen to you, Nick, or Dana? Dana's not here with us. Whereby you only carry a few passengers? Good podcast, by the way. I really like listening to Plane Tales. Regards, David. And this BBC article shows this woman, Karen Grieve, was given the VIP treatment because she just paid £46 for a flight to Crete, and she was the only passenger on board. Apparently, initially she was going to be one of three, but two of them didn't show up. So this was on Jet 2. And the company said it's not unusual for the final flight of the season to have fewer bookings than normal. Ms. Grieve, who was traveling to Crete to write a crime novel, said it was immediately obvious that there were very few passengers when she turned up at the airport for her 16:30 flight on Sunday. And so anyway, she got the VIP treatment from the flight crew. And David's question is to us, Captain Nick, how often does this happen? Have you ever had a flight where you only had one passenger on board?
I've had very few passengers, literally a handful, 4 or 5, but they're generally on sort of Christmas Day flights when no one's really traveling. Everyone's at home with their families, and say you're flying out to somewhere where obviously there aren't a lot of people from other faiths flying. So yeah, it can be extremely quiet, and it's quite common for us to move them all up to the front end of the airplane, which is great for those who are down in economy. And it also helps the cabin crew because it means they only have to man sort of one little bit of the airplane. And you know, it's usually everything for everybody or the whole flight, and it usually turns out to be a great little party. On the other hand, because it does depend a bit on the crew. On the other hand, I have flown an aircraft back with no passengers at all and a full crew, and it was an overnight flight. And you know, we're sitting up there on the flight deck. There's only two of us. We kind of rely on the cabin crew to pop in every now and again and offer us a cup of tea or a bite to eat or things, because we don't have the time to go back and make it ourselves, and we don't know where it all is in the galley anyway. It's kind of a mystery back there. And of course, that flight was we hardly saw anybody the whole flight.
What?
You're expecting them to be up all the time. No, they all tucked themselves into the upper class chairs and all went to sleep.
Darn them.
Nick's still making PAs just to make sure that he.
Yeah, you'd think they would have gone, well, it's actually important to keep these blokes awake. But I think we were the only two awake on the entire aircraft.
Wow. I would have expected the same, not that, but the other that you were expecting, like you would have people up there all the time, keeping you awake, feeding you, doing all kinds of stuff, but no.
No, they completely ignored us.
I only had one flight that I can recall that it was on my 727 days, and we'd fly from Atlanta to Albany, New York, and then we continued to Portland, Maine. And I think we had just a handful of passengers for the first part of the flight, and most of them got off with the exception of one person from that short hop from Albany, New York to Portland, Maine, one passenger. And so we went back and gave them a personalized briefing and didn't have to use the PA. But it was not very common.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've done that one time, and it's awesome. I'm going to date myself here, but we took an Air Canada 747, so that's probably a long time ago, from Toronto to Montreal, where there's three of us on board, and it's just absolutely awesome takeoff. You know, full power, empty 747.
Wow. And I bet you got personalized service there, didn't you?
Well, it was a 40-minute flight, but yeah, but no, this is you're just so used to the 747 being the sort of lumbering, slow, very measured, and this was we just rocketed out of there. It was awesome.
It was like a 757, but bigger. Right. So thanks.
Yeah,
Dave.
it's fun, isn't it, Fred? When you get a nearly empty aeroplane, you can use lots of thrust. I do remember taking a completely empty 340, and this was the 300, the little engine one. We were only taking it to France, I think, to Bordeaux, refit the cabin. We didn't even have a cabin crew member. It was just the two pilots, which is like the weirdest feeling in the world. Pretty big aeroplane. I mean, it's in fact, it's vast, and there's just the two of you. I guess it's just what cargo pilots do all the time. But for us, it felt weird because we only got like 15 tons of fuel and nothing in the cargo holds. And it was a wet day. So I said to my first officer, that water looks pretty bad. Should we say that's contaminated?
Safety
and
first.
He says, yeah, I think we should. So I think we should do a toga takeoff. He says, oh, yeah. So with those four little hair dryers, that damn thing leapt off the runway. And we were battling. And Heathrow, we're going, but Richard, you all right? Yeah, we're fine, thanks. We're fun. It was great.
It got their attention.
Absolutely.
That airplane is doing something they've never seen do before.
And just in case you were asking, that was 5,000 feet per minute.
I think we had about just over 20 degrees nose up to try and keep the speed under control. It was great.
20 degrees, that's standard for my airplane.
Yes.
At least one thing that I can say about the Mad Dog. Our initial pitch attitude's 20 degrees, and it's a pretty good performer getting away from the ground, even when it's heavy, but especially when it's lightweight. It's cool. All right.
Every student pilot, right? That first time that your instructor steps out of the Cessna 152 or 172 and you fly by yourself, it feels like you're flying a jet, right? It's just twice the performance as when you're just alone in the airplane than when the instructor is in there with you. So
yeah, that's true. All right. Moving on, Norbert, he wrote in a while back talking about this event, a 5K on the 5th runway in Atlanta. He said, it's taken me far too long to get you these videos and pictures from the 5K on the 5th runway at Atlanta a few weeks ago. Other than the super early wake-up time, the event was great. The early start meant that it was dark on the runway for the entire run. While still a neat experience, I would have preferred they shifted the run an hour later so that we could get some true feeling and scale of running on the runway, but I get the logistical need for the timing. The sun did start to come up toward the tail end of the run. I finished in exactly 30 minutes, so there was plenty of time for pictures and some fun on the runway before we were ushered off of it and into the airport fire station. Everyone had to be off the runway by 7:30 a.m. and so that it could be cleared and reopened by 8, and flights started to land at 8:15 on the nose. During the award ceremony in the fire station, the staff and security were pretty great about letting people stand near the end of the fire station's driveway so we could watch the planes land and start the long journey to taxi from runway 5 to the terminal. If you've ever landed on, and he's referring to runway 1028, the southernmost runway in Atlanta. If you've ever landed on the 5th runway in Atlanta, you'll know what I mean, especially if you didn't take advantage of access to the bathroom right before descent and landing. Gotta hold it. I've definitely been doing the pee-pee dance in my seat a couple of times during the long ride to the terminal from that runway. I digress, though. Below is a link to a Google Drive with some pictures and videos from the runway fun right after, and some planes that were landing. It was pretty awesome to be that close to the active planes and runway without having to be an airport employee or worry about being arrested for trespassing. Feel free to share with the group, and I'm going to do that. That'll be in the show notes. And in fact, I'm going to go ahead and put that link in the live chat for those of you who want to look at it now. That was Norbert's video and photos of the 5K on the 5th runway in Atlanta last month. Thank you, Norbert, for giving us a, what is the word I'm looking for? Something. Thanks for sending that in. Here we go.
Good. I wonder if they had the runway lights on for them.
I would hope so. Now I'm looking at the photos just in his Drive folder, and it looks like, yes, the green centerline taxiway lights were on, and it appears that the runway lights were on as well. But I'm thinking that you might be suspecting that they wouldn't, because then, you know, you wouldn't have a stray airplane trying to land on a runway that's lighted. I don't know.
I don't know. Do Canada go to Atlanta very
no,
often?
Thank goodness. No, I think they do, yeah.
Oh, no. Turn those lights off. Quick.
That's just not fair, Nick. Anyway.
I can make that joke because my sister-in-law works for them.
Okay. Well, here's one, image 2992. Oh, how appropriate. That's the standard datum plane inches of mercury that we use when we're in the positive space, positive space structure above 18,000 feet in the U.S. Anyway, this one image here, I think this is Norbert on the center line, on his stomach with his arms out. That might be the image for this, or the cover image for episode 298. I love that.
Excellent.
Yeah. Anyway, check it out if you want. And let's see. Let's move on to Tea Kettle 15, and that's all I know about this person.
I would pronounce that Tea Kettle 15. But
oh, Tea Kettle 15.
I think it's 15.
Okay. And why would that be? Is that something that is referencing something that I'm just not grasping, or?
It sounds like a call sign, like Cougar 12 or.
Oh, okay.
That's what a Navy pilot feels like to me. Maybe he'll write it and tell us, but
I think you might be right, Red. Let's see. He says, "Hey, Captain Jeff, just writing to say thanks for your great podcast. It seems clear to me that you do it out of love for aviation. That love shows in your podcasts." Well, great. I'm glad that you can sense that, because all of us here TCattle15 are doing this for a love of sharing our passion for flying. He says, I enjoy the show and actually helps me in my day job as a test pilot. Oh, yeah, you might be right, Fred. My job involves ensuring aircraft meet certain engineering standards, but overshadowing those ones and O's is a concept called mission relation. That is, considering the effect of any particular aircraft characteristic on how it will affect the pilot performing the aircraft's mission. Having grown up in the aviation and the military, 23 years in the U.S. Navy, most as a test pilot, and never having served as an airline pilot, I'm now involved in certifying aircraft for airline use and other types of aircraft and missions too, without having had the benefit of airline flying. Listening to your show helps me understand some of the intricacies of the airline mission, some of the challenges. For that, I thank you very much. You help me do a better job mission relating. Thanks for the great work. Signed, TCattle15. Well, I'm glad that we can now add that to our list of things that we do here at the Airline Pilot Guy Show. Mission relating.
That's exactly right. I can't wait to do my next mission on the way home.
Very cool. Thank you, TCattle15, for your kind words, and I'm glad that we're helping you out in what you're doing. And thanks for making our show a great thing as well. Speaking of great things, Terry McBride, I'm sorry, not Terry McBride. Who sent this in? I'm sorry. Let me go back. Sean sent a link to a Facebook page where somebody had taken their cell phone and took a video. I think it was a Southwest Airlines phone. I'm not going to play it right now because it's just basically you can hear what's going on inside the cabin and there's some kind of an announcement being made. But I think this airplane is either taxiing in or taxiing out. But there is a wing walker on the side watching one of the wings. I'm guessing the left wing. And he is dancing and he is just putting on quite a show. And it's really, really hysterical. You should watch it. He understands that people in the airplane are watching him. And I guess this was, according to Terry McBride on Facebook. So this just happened out my window as I was leaving New York, headed back to Nashville. So I guess they were pushing back. This guy rocks. And again, one of the ramp workers in New York, a Southwest Airlines flight. So I'll put that link in the show notes so you can all see it. It's pretty funny. Here.
No, I'm going to pour a little bit of cold water on. We've had a wingtip walker who failed to do his job properly, and we had one of our wings of one of our Acme Red aircraft driven into a blast wall by a driver. And at Heathrow recently, they had a wingtip walker who didn't do his job, and because when I was up in the tower, Adam Spink showed me, pointed out a building that had been whacked by a wingtip. So much as I appreciate fun, I hope he's doing his job as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. So those incidents to which you referred involved people dancing as well?
Yeah, I think they were doing the foxtrot.
And then they were running really fast when the wingtip hit whatever it was not supposed to.
Running away, yes.
Run away, run away. Anyway, it's cute, but point well taken. You need to be out there doing your job, most importantly. But if you could have some fun doing it, that's...
and why not, yeah.
Yeah, why not? Okay, but it is serious business, right?
It's like $200 million worth of machine you're guiding out there, so...
Yeah.
Yeah, take it a little seriously, guys.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, moving on. Willem Jan sent in a link, a Vimeo.com video. I think this was produced by Nats. Speaking of your professional tower person at Heathrow, this was a beautiful data visualization of a drone incident at Gatwick in July. And again, the link will be in the show notes. Willem says, I think that the clip shows in a beautiful way how drones can impact traffic around an airport. Too bad they didn't show the total delay caused and the estimated extra fuel cost. On the show, you've talked about the risks of collisions, but it might also be good to also talk about the effects of drones when people are working to avoid those collisions. Very good point. So again, this video shows what happened when there was a drone sighting near Gatwick in July of this year, and the disruption it caused. It was a major disruption. Were you flying at the? Well, you normally fly into Heathrow, so maybe you weren't flying at this time, Captain.
Oh, I was actually, but Heathrow. But we did hear about the problems, and there were people diverting because they didn't have enough fuel to hold off. And because the air traffickers are pretty stymied when you get a sighting that's likely to affect the approach path, because they can't see it on radar, and until they're sure it's a threat, they are pretty much obliged to send everyone around, which is what they did. So, of course, it caused enormous disruption. Just from what some idiot who was, I don't know what he was trying to do with it, but it was way too close to the approach path in the airport. And then having decided it was okay, landings continued. And then lo and behold, this guy got it airborne a second time because they had to do it all over again. So,
nice.
I mean, you just want to tear your hair out.
So as a drone operator, Fred, what do you think of all of this?
We usually fly under things, so we never really get up high. But I
know.
It's funny though. I live in the San Francisco Class Bravo to the ground, a surface area, and they were selling a house across from mine, and the photographer came with this big DJI Inspire and took off. We could see the airport, and we could see the airplanes, and so it really is. Oftentimes, and I know this is going to sound. I'm not defending anyone here, but oftentimes I don't like to call them drone operators because that makes them sound like they're qualified, but the people flying those drones just don't know, and they just don't have the awareness. They see the airport, but there's no airplane where they're flying, and so they think it's okay.
Yeah.
And that's why they do it repeatedly, and they just, until somebody goes there and tells them, they just don't know. And I don't know how we tackle something like that. It's definitely not skill. It's definitely not. It's just lack of awareness and maybe a little bit of ignorance.
Yeah, I think that's and that's a tough nut to crack. I mean, how do you, the guy that goes to the Best Buy or whatever store and buys one of these drones and doesn't bother, nobody reads manuals or information. They just kind of pull it out, put it together, and start flying it. And how do you get to those people to, inform them?
You don't, but the next generation of drones, I mean, drones don't last forever. They eventually break, and you've got to buy a new one.
Mine don't really even last a weekend.
Well, and I'm going to defend Fred here because I don't care what airspace he flies in. That drone he was flying around rarely came above the ground. If the next generation should have software in it that physically prevents it from being flown, near or in restricted airspace, and that's the way you tackle it. Now, there are always ways to hack, but the great majority of the drones for fun won't have that knowledge, so they will just go, "Oh, my drone's not flying. I better go somewhere that's safe," and off they'll go and do it. So that's how you do it.
There are some exceptions, though. We get a lot of guys trying to filming. In our area, it's usually fires. Or traffic accidents, and in an area where you're going to have emergency services or low-flying things, that's inexcusable. In and around an airport where the airplanes really aren't anywhere near the ground, even in a surface Class Bravo airspace in San Francisco, that's a little bit more understandable. Sometimes we see these YouTube videos, especially for us, people go flying around the Golden Gate Bridge, and everybody puts negative comments. I always comment and say, "Hey man, I fly my airplane where you fly your drone. You're welcome to come fly with me anytime. We'll hop in an airplane and I'll fly you around to show you." I've had exactly 0 takers. Now that may be more a comment on my flying style than anything else, but it's hard, and it's hard to breach. This is why I have a hard time sometimes with considering this aviation, because it's hard to breach that gap between, I have more in common with you guys in the flying that I do than they do with me, and that gap is even bigger. So it's hard to breach that divide and bring these, let's call them drone pilots or drone operators for now, into the aviation world, because what they do is just so different. So I know it's easy to feel a little bit of outrage when we see this stuff, but it's not an easy issue to solve. And I think we just need to do more.
Yeah.
That was a
we'll figure
prepared
it out
response,
eventually,
by the way, because we get that question a lot.
I'll bet you do. I'll bet you do. You know, and I think we'll cover this on the next show. Liz sent in an article regarding an interesting use of unmanned aerial vehicles, or UAVs, or drones. The easiest way to describe them in Ontario, where they're using them to fly along highways to kind of take pictures of people in high occupancy vehicle lanes, HOV lanes, to see, to kind of bust people that are breaking the rules. And so, I mean, there are a lot of great uses for these things. But yeah, the issue to solve, as you mentioned, Fred, is the education one, and in informing people, that what they're doing with these things may actually significantly impact other people.
Yeah, there's a huge controversy too in our very, very small community. There's some guys in Vancouver that flew over a bridge. It's some very famous, and I think it's Simon Fraser. I'm not sure. Please don't write in if I'm wrong. But that one big white bridge that comes out north of Vancouver, and they were flying. They were diving the pillars of the bridge, and were flying over traffic. Now, obviously, nothing went wrong, but it stirred up a lot of controversy in terms of safety and of something falling through a window. But just by looking at the comments, there's just not enough awareness and education, even within our community. And most people thought it was really cool. So,
yeah.
And
that's really the bottom line. It was cool.
It was cool. And it was cool in the dude cool, kind of stuff. So, yeah.
Well, absolutely. I saw that video of the guys flying a drone around a big freight train.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw that, Fred. That looked fun, because he was basically formatting on this. He was just formatting on this freight train, and as it went under bridges, he was diving this drone on the freight train, and which I just thought, oh, that must be brilliant. But of course, it has ramifications if it was a passenger train, for example, through a window and hurt someone. I don't know, but geez, it looked good.
I want to see that video.
That one's exhilarating, because when you're flying, you're focused on the train, and you're always terrified that you're going to run out either of control range or video range, right? Those things don't fly that far, and so it's pretty, in terms of your own spatial orientation when you're doing this. It's pretty crazy.
Well, it sounds like you said the guy that did the video.
It's the flight plane going past my window.
It's a very small, but again, remember, guys, the Venn diagram of flies drones and has a girlfriend is very small. The intersection is very small, so we're not necessarily expecting those guys to have the best judgment. It's also, there's another Venn diagram which has $2,000 and has a ton of time, and unfortunately, that intersection is quite big. So, yeah.
All right, I should have done. I should have played this before we started talking.
Sound. Yes, I finally get the sound.
Because we have more. Now this involves a drone, but not the kind of drones that we have just been talking about. Personal small drone. This is like a big, like real military drone. Let's see. Seth sent this in. He said, after the recent discussions on the first commercial drone strike, I thought I would share the story from 2011. And he said, I flew into the landing zone this occurred at just after it happened. The C-130 that took the damage was there for almost a year undergoing major repairs. Just thought it would be good context for the continuing discussion on drones versus transport category aircraft. Again, that's from Seth, and he sent this article in from defensetech.org. Mid-air collision between a C-130 and a UAV, and it was a small RQ-7 Shadow UAV apparently collided with what looks like it might be an Air Force Special Operations Command MC-130 in the skies over Afghanistan. And again, this was back in 2011. And so we'll put a link to that incident in the show notes, this article in the show notes, but man, the C-130 is a beefy airplane, and you should see the pictures of the damage of the leading edge of the left wing, it appears. Good chunk of that wing was taken out. So...
to get it between the engines like that. So it looks like he perfectly positioned between two engines and didn't hit either of them, I guess.
Yeah.
But golly, he took out the spar and the wing box. So bloody lucky that that wing didn't fold.
Yeah, that's a good thing it was a C-130 because that's a beefy airplane. It takes a lot to take one of those things down.
Yeah. But you would have assumed the military would have had adequate procedures to separate their unmanned vehicles and their manned vehicles. But I guess the early generation of UAVs probably wasn't that well equipped with transponders or equivalent, so that perhaps it wasn't that easy to spot, and perhaps they hadn't actually talked to each other about, we're flying our drones over here today. So we're flying our C-130 there as well.
So Nick, I fly with a lot of guys that are reservists and National Guard, Air National Guard guys, and some that have just recently ended their full-time military careers and have come on with Acme. And so a lot of these guys I fly with have flown over there in Afghanistan and Iraq, and he said that is the thing that scares them the most. Not enemy fire, but flying around all these darn drones. He said they're everywhere, and everybody is scared silly that this is gonna happen to them, and they're gonna get taken down.
I don't believe it.
And an RQ-7 is tiny. I mean, it's something you can launch off the back of a pickup truck. So it's not the size of a Cessna. I mean, it's gray, it's tiny. It's probably very, very difficult to see.
Wow. Anyway, thanks, Seth, for sending that in and scaring us even more.
By the way, can I recommend one of Marcus's latest Omega Tau interviews?
No, we're not going to talk about that show we're not talking about that show on our show. No way. I don't even know who this guy is. Omega Tau Beta, whatever. What is that? No, I'm just kidding. It's a great podcast. Yes, please mention it.
Well, Marcus Volta has just done one all about a UAV manufacturer, and very clever stuff. Fascinating bloke. And if you've got an interest in the technology behind UAVs, it's worth going and listen how actually they can make the podcast last that long at UAVs. I'm interested, but it's very good.
I'm still upset with Marcus because he's the one that introduced you to the world of podcasting, and I'm still,
You haven't forgiven him
no,
yet?
I have not forgiven him for that.
Oh, damn, poor
You'll never forget your first one, right, Nick?
So I'm told.
Okay.
Yesterday, that's what she said, but his buttons aren't working today.
Oh, was I supposed to push a button? I'm sorry. I was moving forward
That's also what she said. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, that is. Okay, here we go.
That's what she said.
All right. Yay. Okay. Let's hear some audio feedback from Radio Roger.
Greetings, APGers. Roger Stern here, a.k.a. Radio Roger. I have a question about an aviation story I actually covered myself as a reporter, but given my deadline, I was never able to answer one question. It concerns JetBlue Flight 877, which departed Boston's Logan Airport bound for Las Vegas on October 23rd. I've attached the link to the Aviation Herald article. Shortly after takeoff, the crew of the Airbus A320 reported a bird strike and declared an emergency because there was concern that one of the engines could have been affected. The flight was given immediate clearance to return to the airport and land. But the crew needed time to dump fuel and go through the checklist. In all, they requested half an hour of time during which the weather in Boston deteriorated. In consultation with the airline, the captain elected to divert to JFK in New York and flew at a slower than normal speed. I believe they circled over Long Island to dump more fuel, and then landed at JFK without incident a little more than 2 hours after leaving Boston. The Herald mistakenly said it was 3 hours. I was frankly surprised that a captain flying under emergency conditions who is not over the middle of an ocean would elect to stay airborne that long. Is that unusual? Are there situations in which landing might be more risky than flying, so that a captain would prolong his time in the air in order to ensure the safest possible outcome? Let me know what you think. This is Radio Roger, over and out.
So, you heard him, the reference to the Aviation Herald article. What do you all think? Hello? Okay, both of them are muted, so
Sorry,
it's going to be...
Sorry, Jeff, I was just plugging my earphones back in.
Oh, okay.
I'd had listened to that bit of feedback from Radio Roger, and by the way, Roger, yeah, I am going to take you up on your very kind invitation to spend reporting the news around New York. I think that'd be great fun, but I just haven't had the time recently. However, let's do it in the near future. Do you want me to comment on that, Jeff? So
yes,
was that
please.
your question?
Yes, yes.
So the guys between the devil and the deep blue sea a little bit. Once you've decided that you might have taken a bird and you've declared an emergency, obviously they then going to try and land back where you came from, and you then have to weigh up the danger of landing overweight and possibly damaging the aircraft as a result, and also perhaps if the runway there is a bit short, running off the end, compared with staying airborne with a possibly damaged engine. Now, I don't know how they knew it, whether they were just guessing, whether they had indication problems, but regardless, they've still, even if that engine completely fails, they've still got another one. So it's not too bad at the moment. They're going to return. And then, of course, the weather becomes too bad for them to actually return. Then you're going, oh, damn. No. So, yeah, it's a difficult decision. If you'd gone straight in and landed overweight and got away with it, everyone would have been very happy with it. To burn off, everyone, if you'd then been able to land, everyone would have been happy with that. But, of course, having elected to burn off and then found he couldn't land limits, then life just becomes difficult. Where he goes to divert to then, and depending on the weather's and what advice he's given, it just becomes sensible. But it's sort of a compounding situation. He didn't have a lot of control over what he was going to have to do, except for that first decision. Do I possibly damage the aircraft and declare an emergency, or do I just carry on to my destination regardless and have a look at it when I get on the ground? That was the kind of first decision. The rest of it afterwards is like a cascade. And if he ends up diverting a very long way with a possibly damaged engine, I mean, that's just tough. That's kind of if all the alternatives are taken away from you. So, no, not ideal. But and in looking hindsight, I think he probably, if he just turned around and landed straight away without trying to burn off fuel and get all his checks done, and they just decided, right, this engine could fail, I'm just going to put it straight back on the ground, that probably wouldn't. But that's with the element of hindsight. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, I agree with you. In this case, they think they hit a flock of birds. They're guessing that they did, and it may have hit one of their engines. But, you know, I don't know about you, Captain Nick, but I've had bird ingestion in an engine, and you know when a bird, even a small one, has been ingested into your engine, because you get that very distinctive odor of protein burning, like hair. Have you ever smelled hair burning? But it's that and worse, because then you get all the guts and everything else that are being cooked by the engine, and it is drawn in, you know, from the extracted bleed air system. I guess the only airplane that wouldn't have this situation, at least presently, would be the Dreamliner, because it doesn't use bleed air extraction to pressurize the airplane. But, you know, in most airplanes out there, when you suck a bird into an engine, it's very, very evident immediately, if not by the engine indications, that definite putrid smell in the air conditioning system. But I think that they go ahead, Nick.
Just going to say, even if you've taken a bird, though, the engine can quite often cope with it and spit it out the back with no significant damage.
Right.
All you need to do on the next turnaround is have it burst scoped, make sure there's no blades that have been bent out of shape, and away you go again. Until on his engine indications, for example, the vibration of the discs going up, which is what tends to happen if you whack a bird with a big fan. You often notice the engine vibrations start to increase. Then you have a positive indication that you took it on board, or the smell. I mean, I have to say, I've hit a few, not evident. Perhaps it's just the style of our air conditioning, but sometimes it's not evident from a smell.
All right. So we just have to assume, because we don't have all the details here in this report in the Aviation Herald, that there were no adverse engine indications or any other indications that would give the crew cause for concern to immediately get the airplane back on the ground. They know that they hit something, but controllability wasn't a problem. The engine seems to be operating normally. And then, as Captain Nick said, okay, now we're looking at the weather. Do we go back to Boston where the weather's not very good, or we continue down over to Kennedy, which is not that far from Boston? It's a pretty quick flight, and the weather is much better there. So I think that what they did was the right thing to do. And if it's not a full scale, got to get this thing down on the ground as fast as we can, then why not burn the fuel off to get that weight down so you don't have a possible other issue to deal with as far as overweight landing.
I have a question. This is actually a good example. I wonder this a lot, especially in these situations where, like you said, Jeff, there's no controllability issue, there's no engine indication, there's no any other, it's a suspected condition, which is, where's the line between urgency and emergency here, in terms of the decision flow and what you call air traffic control with, because there's no, technically there's no emergency yet, right? This is all precautionary. And if you declare an emergency, that requires a completely different type of handling. So it seems that even though in the books there's 2 levels, that in practice people just go right to I'm declaring an emergency and I want priority handling.
So I think a lot of it has to do with the airline operating procedures and the protocols involved. I believe with this airline and American Airlines, that anytime that they have to, regardless of what the reason is, if they ever have to make a landing, overweight landing, that is, or even if you think you might end up landing overweight, that is an automatic emergency call. And I'm not sure, if you ask me, if that's appropriate. I don't think so, but it seems more like a precautionary kind of a situation where you might need, special handling perhaps, but not necessarily full blown. I got to get on the ground, hair's on fire. Let's get, but I think that it depends on the airline, whether or not you must declare an emergency. But I know that there are some out there that do require it. I guess just to be on the side of, safety, I guess. I don't know. But that's a good question. That there is a line there. And, so to take this situation over to Europe, and so are you you hit a flock of gulls and you don't notice any anomalies with your engines or controllability, whatever, but you know that you should probably fly around a little bit to burn off that fuel to keep from landing overweight. Are you going to declare on the radio, Mayday, Mayday, Mayday? Don't think so. I think you'd be crazy to do that, wouldn't you, Captain Nick?
Yeah, that's exactly right. For us, a Mayday means life is in danger, basically. So I would declare a pan. And that just means it's a level of urgency rather than danger, and you'll be given a level of priority, but not the same level of priority that you would if you declared a Mayday. There's not heaps of guys with pans flying around all the time. You're probably going to get a pretty high level of priority, but the idea is that if there's a guy with a pan and then someone else declares a Mayday, the guy with the pan steps aside and lets the Mayday aircraft do his thing, and he gets the next level of control. So that's the whole reason for it. I personally like it, but it's the one I grew up with. That's the reason I like it. So I understand the ramifications. And of course, the same thing doesn't really apply over here. There's only one level of an emergency, and that's say I am declaring an emergency. That's it. It's cut right.
In the military, in my Air Force days, we did have another level that we called a precautionary, and that kind of equates with a pan kind of a situation. But you're right, Captain Nick. In this world over here, it's either you're declaring an emergency or you're not. So it's the only other thing that we have is when we have fuel states. If you declare minimum fuel, that's not an emergency situation. But if you're in a situation where you think you're going to land with your emergency reserve or less, then you would declare a fuel emergency in that case. But in the world of malfunctions, as far as I know, here in the United States, it's either you declare an emergency or you don't.
Yeah.
Do you guys know the origin of those two expressions, of the pan and the Mayday?
I believe
From
we've
the
talked
French.
about it. Yeah, it's a French.
Yeah. So pan is the French word for breakdown, straight up, and you don't spell it the same, but you say it the same. And Mayday means help me in French.
Oh, m'aider or something like that.
Mayday, like M apostrophe, and then aid is the word for help.
Oh.
That's straight up what it means. And it makes sense when you think about how you should use those expressions as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. It does.
If I had a passenger on board with a heart attack, I would declare a mayday because there is life at danger. If I had a passenger on with a broken arm, I would declare a pan. Die of a broken arm, but on the other hand, you want to get the airplane on the ground and get medical assistance to them as soon as. It's kind of another indication of the two levels of declaring an emergency in Europe.
Okay. It's it's too bad we can't get this all, like we can all be on the same page. Maybe eventually that will happen. Maybe they'll get together and say, you know what, we need to standardize this.
I think that's Mr. Trump's idea, isn't he? He's going to do that for us. Isn't that right?
Remember, we don't do politics on this show, nor religion. So
I'll let you edit that out then.
Now we're going to keep that in.
You can just report a bigly problem and you'll be okay. You'll get priority handling.
Yes, I'm sorry. Nick, I think he's breaking up. I don't understand.
He's breaking
up. Breaking up is hard to do.
Yes, it is. All right. I skipped this on our show notes because I didn't have an actual tab for this. This was some audio feedback sent in by Brandon, and it's been a while since I've listened to it, so I'm going to have to listen to it myself again. Here we go.
Hey, AVG crew, this is Brandon. I've been listening for a couple of years now, and first time leaving a recording, but just wanted to share a little story. I finally got a chance to ride on a Mad Dog last weekend out of Houston. Was excited because after hearing about it so much from the podcast, I was interested to ride on it again. And we got on board, sat down. Then they come through and say that there's a warning light in the cockpit saying that one of the doors isn't latching. So got delayed, which was, I just had to sit back and chuckle because of all the stories you guys have with the Mad Dogs. But I just thought it was funny. And little story for Dr. Steph, we flew up to Washington, D.C. for the Marine Corps Marathon. My girlfriend ran in it, which I didn't run this year, and she got a 4:03 time, which was really good. So it was her first full marathon. I was a spectator in that one, which, if you've ever tried to watch a marathon, can be a little intense trying to meet up throughout the course. I think I saw her 4 times, and I walked half as far as she ran, so it was pretty fun event. Then a question for Captain Nick. If Acme Red switched its whole fleet over to Mad Dogs, would you retire now or would you keep flying them? Just a random question, I guess. I would imagine I know the answer. I mean, most everybody that I've talked to that loves flying like everybody does the salary was the same, he'd probably fly short hops in a 172. But anyway, I appreciate the show. You guys keep it up. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Brandon. Nick, what's your answer?
I would love to have a go flying the Mad Dog, quite honestly.
I think you'd like it, actually.
It would be yeah, I think it would be a challenge that I would enjoy tackling, and I wouldn't guarantee I'd be any good at it, but I'd love to give it a go. And I've said this before. I fly in the Airbus because I know how to fly it, and I can fly it well. Fly any airplane if that's what the job required me to do, and I really don't care, quite honestly, between you, me, and the gatepost. And if they said, right, there are no Airbuses, you've all got to fly, you're going to have to fly Boeing 737s, probably one of my least favorite airplanes, I would say, okay, fair enough, I'll have to fly that. But if they said that, I'd actually be really quite excited to have the opportunity to see how I got on with it.
Good point. Good point. I figured that would have been your answer because, regardless of what kind of airplane we fly, we're pilots, and Fred's a good example of that. Fred can't stick with one type at all. How many now? 15, Fred?
Oh, I think I'm at 17 or something.
17. Wow.
Yeah.
Oh my God, Fred.
But we do this. We don't do this for the love of the airplane that we're flying. We do this because we love flying. Whatever flying machine it is, we put ourselves in. I think we kind of enjoy, experiencing different types, and they're all different and they're all wonderful. All right.
Which is your favorite, Fred?
No, I'd love to try the Mad Dog. They won't let me, but I'd love to.
I think that you would find that the Mad Dog is very similar to the types of airplanes that you're used to flying, Fred, because it's all, it's that cable that's going all the way out to that control tab actually flying the airplane. And it's much more similar to a 172 than any other airliner out there flying. But it is an air transport category airplane. It's got a great pedigree. It's a great airplane. I never thought I'd ever say that, but I guess, again, I've been flying it for so long, perhaps I've forgotten what it's like to fly a Boeing and a Lockheed. Never flown an Airbus myself. But, that's just what I'm used to, and I like actually feeling how the airplane's flying. And, for a lot of us, flying airplanes is more than just a job. It's more than a profession. It's kind of, it's our craft, and we take a lot of pleasure in doing it as best we can. And just the being one with the machine is what a lot of us are going for.
Absolutely.
Let's see. You know what? It's a great time now, I believe, to do this week's installment of Plane Tales. What do you guys think?
Woohoo!
Let's do it.
Of the armistice between the Allies and the Germans that ended the war and took effect at 11 o'clock on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918. Were I to single out a particular pilot from amongst those nations who fought in the air alongside the British during that long and bloody war, it might be a young Canadian, William George Barker. Born just before the turn of the century, Billy Barker grew up on the frontier of the Great Plains, riding horses, shooting, and working on his father's farm and sawmill. A good student, as often or not his work kept him from attending classes, but he excelled in many things. In particular, he was an excellent shot with his Winchester repeating rifle and a fine horseman. He was 20 when war was declared and the call went out to the Dominion of Canada that the young men of the Empire were needed to fight for the mother country. Barker answered and enlisted as a trooper with the 1st Canadian Mounted Rifles. He served as a Colt machine gunner for a year in the trenches of the Western Front, and in particular in the Ypres salient of Belgium. He endured the filth and rats, the bullets cracking overhead, and the unceasing artillery bombardments that filled his days. He was horrified at the carnage, and before long he yearned to join what seemed to be a cleaner war, being fought in the skies overhead, and he applied to join the Royal Flying Corps. The RFC were suffering a shortage of observers, particularly since the Germans had developed a method for their Fokker Eindecker E3s to fire through the propeller arc. Losses amongst the slow British BE2s were high. Billy's accuracy with a machine gun was in demand, and after only 6 days of training, he found himself with 9 squadron. Billy did well and survived, unlike almost all of the original crews in the squadron who had died or been shot down. He even claimed his first kill when he shot down a Roland scout who dove out of the sun behind them. Barker swung round and loosed a volley that hit the German in the forehead, killing him. 2 weeks later, he downed a second Roland scout in flames and was mentioned in dispatches. Barker was officially attached to the RFC, promoted to 2nd lieutenant, and posted to No. 4 Squadron, which was in great demand as the Battle of the Somme raged below and the generals needed constant aerial photo reconnaissance. He was wounded in the thigh, but such was the importance of their duties, he was simply bandaged and sent back to flying. On a mission to photograph new German defense works in their BE-2, Barker and his pilot were attacked by a pair of Albatros D-2 scouts, but they did such damage to one that they fled the scene. Getting back to the task in hand, they had almost finished when they were intercepted by 4 more. Again, Barker's skill with his gun scared them off, and they returned to their base with the vital photographs. For this and the high quality of his previous work, Barker received his first decoration, the Military Cross. On November the 13th, 1916, the British finally battered their way into and held the important village of Beaumont-Hamel. Barker and the rest of the RFC were instructed to maintain a close watch on German activities in the area. Barker and his pilot were flying very low when they spotted a large concentration of German troops. He proceeded to send an emergency zone call. This had priority, and the artillery within the entire sector was brought to bear on this important target. In the area the German troops were sheltering, explosions erupted, throwing mud, men, and machinery into the air. When the smoke cleared, the destruction was terrible. A formidable force of 4,000 had been broken. Barker was an ambitious man, and not content to remain an observer, he applied for pilot training. He moved to a flight school in England and soloed after an incredibly short 55 minutes of training. The training was rudimentary, and there was no instruction on aerial tactics, dogfighting, evasive maneuvers, or even how to recover from a spin. It was hardly surprising that the average life expectancy of a pilot on the Western Front was only 11 days. Billy Barker returned to the front line on No. 15 Squadron, this time in the front cockpit of an RE-8. Hardly an improvement on the cumbersome BE-2s, it wasn't a match for the German Albatros D-2s or the Halberstadt Scouts. Nevertheless, he soon shot down one. He quickly gained a reputation for being one of the best recce pilots on the front and was again mentioned in dispatches for accuracy directing artillery fire onto a trench filled with German troops preparing for an attack. Moments after, he was targeting 2 long-range artillery guns, and during this flight, his aircraft was so peppered with bullet and shrapnel holes that it collapsed on landing, never to fly again. This action gained him a bar to his military cross. In August that year, he was injured by a shard of shrapnel that struck his head. He passed out from blood loss, but his observer brought him round again in time to land his badly damaged aircraft by pouring liquor down his throat from a flask. With his wound patched up, he returned to duty. A short rest spell in the UK followed, with Barker instructing new pilots, but not happy to be away from the action, he pestered his superiors for a posting to a scout squadron flying one of the new Sopwith Camels. Frustrated with the delay, he beat up the headquarters building until his paperwork was hastened through, probably to get him out of their hair, and he headed off to 28th Squadron as a flight commander, flying the Camels on the Western Front. His first combat mission was in October 1917, escorting a group of bombers when the expected swarm of new and capable enemy Albatross D-3 fighters came up at them. In the 15-minute dogfight that followed, Barker literally shot the wings off a green Albatross. 2 days later, Barker became an ace by shooting down 2 more. He was leading a flight of 6 Camels, and they were strafing a line of soldiers in a rainstorm when they were surprised by a flight of Albatrosses. 2 Camels from his flight immediately spun into the mud, and Barker was fighting for his life. Bullets shot through his fuselage from the tail up to the cockpit. Turning as tightly as he could, he barely cleared a copse of trees and then unexpectedly pulled up into a loop. He leveled off only a few feet from the ground behind the Albatross and fired a burst into it, sending the plane crashing into the ground. Another Albatross got behind him, and Barker repeated the maneuver to shoot down his 6th aircraft. 2 days following this encounter, he downed his 7th German fighter. He might well have become the leading ace on the Western Front, but the Italians fighting in the Austro-Hungarian offensive were suffering, and the RFC sent 4 squadrons to the Italian front to give aid. Italy was a far cry from the muddy trenches of France. Their airfield was backed by the snow-capped Alps, and the only real discomfort was having to live in tents. The Austrians had been fighting the demoralized Italian Regia Aeronautica and didn't expect to be confronted with experienced pilots from the Western Front. Barker opened the aerial killing for the British when his flight of 4 Camels were jumped by 12 Albatrosses. After 20 minutes of dogfighting, he ended the skirmish by downing one of their opponents. In his combat logbook, Barker wrote, "I dived onto one and fired about 50 rounds, and he went down in a vertical dive. I followed, and as he flattened out at 5,000 feet, I got a burst off of 80 rounds at close range. His top wing folded back to the fuselage, and later the lower wing came off." Barker quickly became renowned as one of the war's top balloon busters. These observation balloons, or to be more correct, aerostats, were used by both sides to elevate artillery spotters so that they could watch the fall of the shell fire. Highly flammable hydrogen gas was used to inflate the balloons, so they were very vulnerable to tracer bullets covered with flammable phosphorus. However, they were also very well protected by anti-aircraft guns and long-range machine guns, so balloon busting was a risky business. Despite this, Barker and his companion Hudson often went about as a pair and coordinated their attacks so that one kept the gunners' heads down whilst the other attacked the balloons. They risked admonishment by frequently going out together on extra flights to practice their attacks, and once they had their teamwork perfected, their attacks became relentless. The wing commander wrote, "Captain Barker observed that thick ground mist made conditions ideal for attacking balloons. He and Lieutenant Hudson flew to where 2 large observation balloons and 3 small ones were closely parked a few feet in the air. Captain Barker and Lieutenant Hudson attacked the large balloons, which caught fire, and all 5 were destroyed. There was no interference from the ground except desultory and very badly aimed firing from 2 heavy tracer batteries near the balloons. Christmas Day had Barker with 2 others paying the Austrian pilots a visit. On cardboard they wrote, "To the Austrian Flying Corps from the English RFC, wishing you a Merry Christmas." They then proceeded to fly across the field wingtip to wingtip, firing their incendiary Buckingham bullets into the open doors of the hangars. Soon the planes and hangars were burning fiercely. They swooped around and shot up the air raid trenches where the mechanics and some of the pilots were trying to hide. They killed 12 and wounded many others. The trio made it back and quietly persuaded the mechanics to patch the bullet holes, as unauthorized flying was banned. In reply, after a day of drinking and brooding, on the morning of Boxing Day, the Austrians headed out for revenge. Most were still drunk when at 8 a.m. they were roused to avenge the insult. They couldn't even maintain position in the air and soon became scattered. Barker was awakened by the air raid alarm, and the whole squadron jumped to their camels. The Austrians were in disarray and mistakenly bombing a nearby airfield when 29 Squadron and some Italian planes intercepted them. A large melee ensued, which resulted in the loss of 12 Austrian aircraft, won by Barker. 6 enemy machines came down all around the RFC aerodrome. 1 Austrian plane landed on the British field, and they ran out to capture the wounded pilot, but found him out cold from drink. Another captured Austrian was still wearing his formal mess dress uniform under his leather flying coat. Barker's exploits became legend, and he was tasked with all sorts of special missions, such as dropping enemy spies behind enemy lines. His count of kills grew, as did his row of medals. The citation for his second bar to his military cross read, Captain William George Barker, DSO MC, for conspicuous gallantry and devotion to duty. When leading patrols, he on one occasion attacked 8 hostile machines, himself shooting down 2, and on another occasion 7, one of which he shot down. In 2 months, he himself destroyed 4 enemy machines and drove down 1 and burned 2 balloons. Moving forward to September 1918, has Barker flying the Sopwith Snipe. He was supposed to be commanding a training school in England, but had wrangled a chance to visit the Western Front. 22,000 feet, he spotted a German recce aircraft below him and dove to attack. He first killed the rear gunner before sending the shattered aircraft to Earth, but Barker had failed to spot a Fokker D-7 fighter climb up behind him. The first he knew was when an explosive bullet shattered his right femur. Despite his injury, Billy fought the German and circled behind, shooting his fuel tank and sending him down in flames. His fight, however, had dropped him right into a Jasta, a German fighter squadron, of an entire circus made up of nearly 60 Fokkers. His tiny snipe was being chewed to shreds, and he was hit in the left thigh, but fighting back valiantly, he drove 2 Fokkers down in spins. Fainting from pain and blood loss, his aircraft fell out of control for several thousand feet. When he came around, he was amongst a second Jasta, and in desperation he charged at a nearby Fokker, firing all the way. Just before they collided, the enemy aircraft blew apart, but Barker's left elbow had been hit and completely shattered. Fainting a second time, he came around in a spin, and on recovery, he found himself on the tail of another Fokker, which he shot down in flames. Trying to disengage, he was harried by a German flight who shot off his fuel tank. With his engine faltering, he switched to the small reserve tank and evaded until he crossed the Allied lines before crash landing. Members of a Highland regiment pulled him from the wreckage and were amazed to find him alive. Thousands of British soldiers, including Canada's General Andrew McNaughton, had watched the whole fight and were cheering lustily as Barker unbelievably beat his way through an entire German circus. He remained unconscious for several days in hospital in Rouen. In the aftermath, he received congratulatory telegrams from the King, the Prince of Wales, and Lord Hamilton. On November the 20th, 1918, he was awarded the Victoria Cross and was again inundated with congratulations from Prime Minister Borden, the Canadian General Staff, and the one that meant the most to him, from Lieutenant Colonel Billy Bishop. His years after the war were filled with constant pain, debilitation, and depression. He missed the hard and fast life of combat. Then, quite unexpectedly, whilst test flying a new aircraft for the new Royal Canadian Air Force, at only 200 feet, his aircraft turned inverted and crashed nose first into a field. There was no indication of a fault in the aircraft, and nobody really knows what happened. It doesn't really matter. He died an ace, a hero, and the most decorated serviceman in the history of Canada.
Wow. What a story, and what a man.
Music by Ben Sounds. It's a great story, isn't it? A great story, isn't it, Jeff? And thanks, of course, to Liz, who a little picture memorial. I guess it's his grave, which is not that far from her in Toronto. And she's promised to go and take me a picture that I can use to put on that Plaintail once we get the Plaintail page up. But him surviving that last flight, incredible. I mean, I find he had 3 bullets in one leg. He had his entire femur shattered, the main leg bone on his shattered. He had his elbow completely blown apart, so he couldn't use his left hand. He only had his right hand left, right arm left. And how the hell he survived that crash landing, I do not know. But yeah, an incredible man.
Yeah, the only thing I can add is that production note. Let's watch our language next time, Nick.
Oh, all those fuckers.
Yeah. Family show, right? Hang on.
Family show, ladies and gentlemen. Family show.
Yeah, and all those fuckers were Dorniers, or whatever the joke is, yes.
Oh, man.
Yeah, my apologies. I'm doing my best, but
I know. Oh, speaking of doing our best, if you're watching the video, we're stuck in the Plaintail screen. I can't have done everything to try to jar this thing loose, but yeah, it's better than looking at my mug, that's for sure. Get to look at the big old microphone there.
Absolutely. Yeah. And as Liz Piper says in the chat room, we Canucks are tough.
Yeah, agree. You are. You are. Wow.
And Willem says he's proud of, from Germany, of course, he's proud of their Fokkers.
Huh. Yeah, I think they would be. Wow. As Dana would say, wow. Wow.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Yeah, what a great story. Thank you, Liz, for coming up with that topic. And as Captain Nick just mentioned, still working on that. We're getting closer, or I'm getting closer to having that Plaintails page and feed up and running. But I always have to look for space in our media server to upload those audio files for y'all. So That will be soon. I'm sure.
The faux pas. Sorry, Willem. He's from Holland. He's from the Netherlands, not from Germany. Oops.
Oh, wow. Major mistake there.
Well, but he did say our Fokkers, so I didn't know. Are they Dutch, the Fokker?
I think, aren't they?
I don't know. I thought they were German, but anyway, hence my confusion.
Hey, Fred, looking at the video here, looking at your mug, I noticed that there's a facial hair going on there. Is that a Movember thing?
It's a I've been traveling for the past 7-day thing, and I didn't pack shaving cream, so. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Well, it looks good on you.
Thank you.
You should keep. That's a good look. All right.
You're a tough guy, Fred. Don't you just shave with a hunting knife in the mirror of your car?
That was one time.
A man's man.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thanks again, Nick, for the excellent plane tale. And
hang on a minute. I'm getting corrections all the time here from the chat room now. They're telling me that Fokker are Dutch. So I want to know what the Dutch were doing, building airplanes for the Luftwaffe in the First World War. What was going on there?
That's a good question. And Neville, of course, he said, yes, the Fokkers are Dutch, but the Effers are German. That's Neville. I didn't say that. Neville did.
No.
So all the bad email goes to nevillebounds@gmail.com. No, I don't think that's his actual address, but I think he can probably figure it out. All right. Let's see. Well, that was all I had in the feedback folder. We're at the 2.5 hour point, and I think that this might be a good time to shut down the show for now. Again, we're planning on recording live in 2 days, Thursday afternoon. For those of you who are just joining us at this moment, and that'll be episode 299. And that will be published sometime early in the week of Thanksgiving week. And then, of course, we're looking forward to the big 300 episode celebration on Saturday, the 25th of November.
And when you do that next show, Jeff, I won't be around, so I'm going to miss you, of course. But I'd be very grateful if, with that plain tale, if you could tell everyone that it was Pilot Pip's suggestion.
Okay.
That hello, I've just had an intruder in my room.
Company.
Yeah. Hello. No, thank you, housekeeping. I did put do not disturb in my room as well.
This is when Pilot Pip. This is when they realize that Captain Nick is doing the show in his underpants.
Well, that's why there's no video today.
Okay.
I'm just saving everyone.
so next episode in a couple of days, we're going to be doing a plain tale, and the idea was from Pip, Pilot Pip.
Correct? Pilot Pip. I mean, he's not the only person that's asked me to do a plain tale on this particular aircraft, but he's the most recent. That's all.
Okay, very good. We'll mention that for sure. So if you want to learn more about the show, please head over to airlinepilotguy.com, where you'll find information about the crew and the community and the coffee fund, merchandise, and all that stuff and more. And again, that's airlinepilotguy.com. We have a couple of apps for your iOS and Android devices that are free, and they are ad-free as well. So please check that out by going over to the website or just looking for these show notes somewhere. And we'll have links to the app stores and such for you there. Social media, we have a presence on Twitter. Well, Captain Nick, why don't you go ahead and tell us about the social media? If you can.
Okay. I'm sorry, you just got out there.
Oh, okay.
Facebook is facebook.com/airline pilot guy. And we're on Twitter and you can get hold of us at the crew, and I think we're also on Slack, but someone else knows about that.
Yeah, hang on. Hillel, let me move out of the way. He's going to tell you about that.
APG listeners, please join us on our Slack team. On Slack, we share news and ideas. We suggest episode and plain tales topics. We plan meetups and events. To get into the Slack team, please send me a tweet with your preferred email address to @HI11E1, and I'll send you an invitation. That's Hillel @HI11E1, and see you in Slack.
Thank you very much for that. And let's see, Fred, how can we learn more about you and follow you on Twitter and any other presence you might have on the interwebs?
I don't want to ruin my international mystery man reputation, but it's at Little Miss Sunshine on Twitter, and I don't even know how that's spelled.
Little Miss Sunch.
Yeah, SUNSH. Little Miss Sunshine, I think full was taken. But yeah, I tweet about aviation, I tweet about technology and security.
Excellent. And also perhaps on the YouTube, I mean the Twitter, there's some kind of a link toward your YouTube channel?
There is. There's a couple. There's a drone channel and an aviation channel, but they haven't been updated in a very, very long time. So hopefully I'll get back to doing that in the future.
Well, that's timeless, that stuff that you have on there. So check that out.
There's some fun stuff on there.
Absolutely. So thanks, Fred, for taking time out from your busy workday over there in Barcelona.
My pleasure.
It's always great to see you. And I look forward to seeing you in person in just under 2 weeks. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, and I should see Fred in San Francisco. Fred, are you coming up to join us at the meet?
Yeah, absolutely.
Tell us about that. When's the meetup?
Yeah, there is going to be a meetup in Napa, and Landon is organizing it. So look for it on Twitter and Facebook. But anyone who wants to come, you're welcome to.
Excellent. I look forward
we
to
can get a tour. We're meeting Jan, and we're going to get a tour of the California Highway Patrol Airborne Division that they have up there. So that's going to be great for them.
Yeah, there's a bunch of us that are going to make sure that we have no outstanding tickets, and then we're going to go to that meetup. But yes, it's going to be fun.
Or wear disguises.
Well, hopefully after you've been to the meetup, you won't have any outstanding tickets anyway.
Maybe we'll just fly in to avoid any issues with cars.
Dan will take care of all that. Don't worry about it.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, that's cool. So again, thanks everybody for downloading the show on your favorite podcatcher. If you use iTunes, please subscribe, even if you don't necessarily get your podcast delivered via iTunes. But if you have any time, write a review, and that helps with exposing other folks to the show as well. And let's see, that's about all I can think of right offhand. So until next time, wishing you clear skies, unlimited visibility, and tailwinds. Take care. God bless.
Bye, everybody.
Say goodbye, Fred.
Bye,
Fred's
all.
Muted. Oh, he's not muted. Bye, Fred.
I guess. Here we go.
I used to be such a good pilot till I started APG. I opened doors for little old ladies. I helped them to their seats. Airline pilot guy, I fly America. Oh, airline pilot guy, he can land in heavy fall. Oh, I got no friends.
All right, that was from our good friend Miami Hick. We haven't heard from him in a while. That's No More Airplanes. I used to be a good pilot until I started APG. Thank you, Brent.
I think that applies to all of us.
I had to admit, I've had that song. I have that. If I let the podcast go too long and a song starts playing, I can't get it out of my head for 24 hours.
Yeah, that's definitely an earworm. Yeah. Anyway, thanks everybody for. Go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just saying, good show despite the audio problems.
No, it worked out, Nick.
So, sorry about that.
Fine.
Yeah, we could pretty much understand the gist of things you were saying, and then I'm hoping that file that you're recording locally will have it all uninterrupted, and should the audio podcast should sound okay.
I'm sure it'll be fine. I'm looking forward to getting that mute switch though from you when I come up end of the month, because that'll make life a lot simpler. Because when I listen to the recording, I'll go, "This sounds so weird."
Well, what's funny is
when you're conversation
inside baseball. So when they mute on the Hangout, the local recording is still recording them. And when I do the editing of the audio, it's interesting because on the last show, Steph, she just sneezed like a big giant sneeze, and it was like when we were playing some audio feedback, and I almost fell off my chair. Headphones on, and all of a sudden, I went, "Whoa!" What is that?
When she breaks wind, it really is deafening. That's the worst bit.
It's a good thing we don't have smell-o-vision. But,
it's all that IPA she drinks, Jeff.
I think so.
Yeah, it's not good for her digestion.
It's not good for our noses either.
Yeah, that's when I'm very happy with doing this via the internet.
It's kind of fun doing this without Steph. She's not here to defend herself. I'm sure she's listening though right now. Hey, Steph. How you doing?
Hi, Steph. Don't mean it really.
She's going to open up the next show with an official response. I have a short statement to read.
Yeah. Yes, HR would like to interview the following employees.
Yeah, 300 may be our last episode.
Yeah. But Jeff, you got me looking at that Icon A5, Jeff. I've been looking at the videos and the brochures. And
what an amazing airplane!
What an amazing, and they've built so much interesting characteristics in that machine. It's only 100 horsepower.
I know. There's a Rotax, 100 horsepower, and it's got amazing performance for that engine. And I would love to. I mean, that's kind of a dream of mine to have some kind of a amphibious or float plane or something like that, and just being able to land almost anywhere.
It's trailerable. You can put it in the garage. I mean, it's and what got me was the windows. You could put the canopy down, and then the side window is still open, and so you can stick your arm out and fly with your arm. Oh, it just looks.
Yeah, those videos are awesome. There's one of they took the Roy Halladay ones down. Those were some good videos as well. Of course, I understand why. But they have one of Jimmy Buffett. Jimmy Buffett has had a amphibious airplane for a number of years, and I guess that the Icon people knew of his passion for amphibious airplanes and brought him out to their place out in Napa and took him up to Lake Berryessa and flew him around. So I think he's probably ordered one because he said he can't wait to fly it in the Bahamas or something.
Well, I'm going to see. I mean, we know we have to know enough people. We got to manage to get a little intro ride or orientation flight in one of those. We got to set this up. It just looks like I'm just curious to see the control feel and then the performance. But Halladay was just a great spokesman. I mean, that's why they designed that airplane, right? And I looked at his Instagram feed, and he was on a sand barge somewhere and at a dock some other place, and it just looks like a really, really interesting adventure machine.
Mm-hmm. So, hey, so Fred, we'll get you APG credentials for, a reporter, and then you can get and just tell them that we have like millions of people that watch the show.
Oh, I won't have to. They'll know.
Yeah, well, they'll know, of course. That would be awesome. Yeah, I hope you get a chance to go up and fly in that thing. And you need to buy one, Fred, so I can go fly with you.
Yeah, I know. I don't. They just doubled the price. I don't know if I can afford one. I chiefed it. Yeah, it just I mean, if you have $300,000 to spend, you could spend it on a Lamborghini or on this. it's going to be way more fun in an Icon A5.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I know fast cars, that'd be cool, but come on, flying around in a neat little airplane like that, little sport aircraft. Oh.
Yeah, well, we'll see if we'll see if we can set it up so and give you enough notice to get out here. But I let me see. I know a couple guys over there. They're not very warm relationships, but I haven't talked to them in a while. But there's just not that many people around. So
yeah,
we also do is usually trade. Especially if it's in Palo Alto, we'll trade rides in the Great Lakes. So we'll trade a ride in the T6 or something like that. So
there you go.
Little pilot bargaining.
Sounds good. Let us know how that goes. Brian Parrott in the chat room says, hey, y'all, looking for some input. I'm about 3 or 4 cross-country flights and a written test away from my PPL, but I'm thinking of pausing until spring just because of schedule/weather. Thoughts?
No, don't stop, man.
Yeah, crack on. Continuity is very important when you're in the early stages of learning. And if you pause and try and get back into it, it'll take you a lot more flights than it would be if you just waited for a window weathers in the current part of the year.
You got to lay siege to it, man. Don't get discouraged. Don't look at the weather. Go to the airport. Keep going. At some point, it will break.
Yeah, I wonder where he is. Must be in the eastern portion of the States or something. Because out in the West, I wouldn't imagine that weather would be that much of a factor, even in the wintertime, right?
The issue we run into we run into daylight issues. It gets dark at 4.
Oh yeah.
And so for the people, it's both good and bad for the private pilot cross country, because you do have to do one at night, but it's only one, and that's with an instructor. So there's no. I think he's maybe thinking about his solo cross country, which is day. That's gonna be day VFR. Yeah. Oh, he's in Utah. Oh yeah. I keep going. Yeah, I would love to fly in Utah, by the way. There must be some amazing both scenery and different flying conditions. We talked a little bit about flying different airplanes earlier on the podcast, but I think also flying in different conditions, different terrain is another way to keep sharp.
Yeah, higher elevations definitely affects your performance, and a lot of high terrain around that area too. Huh. Yeah, lots of mountains, he says. Yeah, that's for sure. Don't fly into those mountains. We'd like to call it cumulogranite. You don't want to fly in those.
Never heard that before.
Oh, really? Yeah. Yeah, we talk about, that's kind of a phrase we use a lot in the airline world, at least at my company, talking about, staying away from the cumulogranite.
My favorite one is if...
I learned that in my early days in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite one was being the perfect wingman is if your lead flies you into the side of a mountain, that there's 2 holes perfectly spaced apart on the side of the mountain. That's my favorite one.
It's called integrity. Like those the Thunderbirds when they were flying the T-38. I think that happened. There was a control problem with lead, and they were in the bottom of a loop, and the whole foreship or whatever it was just followed them right into the ground.
I had one of those one time when we had briefed so the guy that was getting his wing card had to do a buddy landing. Lead has a problem, and so he's going to take you all the way to the ground, go around, then come back and land as a single. And we literally had a rudder cable snap on takeoff, and we had a real life emergency, and we could not get this guy to detach because he thought we were flying through the scenario. And at one point we just gave up and said, I just stay there, man, we're going to go back and land. He just didn't understand that this was not a real, an actual real situation where we had a controllability issue with the airplane. And we did the inspection, the check and everything. And he's still right there. And dude, just get out.
Were you communicating with them?
With visual signals, we're on tower. And so we gave him all the right signals. I guess he missed a couple, but we went back around. He did his chase landing. He did a glorious pull, didn't hit the windsock, and went back around and landed. And came back with a big smile. We're sitting there going, "You understand? You just failed the flight, right?"
So that's probably a good reason to have some kind of a signal that we're not doing this. Is no longer a simulated scenario anymore. This is for real.
That's got to be a new SOP, absolutely. Yeah. But you don't think about that when you brief a sample emergency, that you're actually going to have that actual emergency.
Right. sometimes Nick and I are familiar with this. You'll be in the simulator and, you're expecting something to go wrong in the simulator. And then sometimes the simulator will just do something that they're not expecting it to. And, so there's I don't know what the phrase is, but basically they say, okay, this is not anything that we input. This is the sim doing its own thing. And
Oh, wow.
this is not the real situation. So, stop, this is a simism or whatever.
But that's still one of my all-time favorite things to do, is to come in chase on a landing and then just watch your lead land, and then you go around and come back. It's still one of the most fun things you can do with a couple of airplanes.
Really gets you that feeling of when you're there with another airplane and you're watching it, and then it gives you that sense of speed and the thrill that you're just flying. Because when you're by yourself, you don't always get all those sensations. But anyway, that's cool.
Well, next time we're out here, Jeff, we'll take a couple of airplanes up and
all right.
Sounds like fun.
Awesome. All right. Thanks everybody.
I can attest to that. It is great fun.
Yeah, that's what I hear. Let's see. Everybody in the chat room, thanks for hanging with us today on the early show. I know it's kind of unusual. Several people showed up in the chat room and said, well, what's going on here? It's the weekday and it's like in the morning. What's not right? So yeah, so it was just the best opportunity for us to fire off a couple shows this week, and Nick was available because he's in Miami. And Nick, do you have time to go get something to eat before your call?
I do, thank you. Yes, that was great timing. So I've got I just need to pack, and although I must admit this is a weird hotel, we keep phoning them and saying, what time is our call? And they say, well, we haven't had it yet. Can you just tell me when it usually is? Oh no, we can't tell you that in case we get it wrong, and then we'd be blamed. And I'm going, no, I just want to know approximately. And they go, no, sometime between 1 o'clock and 5 o'clock. Yeah, that's very
that narrows it down.
They're weird, but we haven't been at this hotel very long.
That name sounds familiar to me. I think I've stayed in that hotel, but it was probably 20-something years ago.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, there's a whole bunch up here on this street, and the Confidante is the latest. But I think
is it an older hotel?
Yeah, they're all a bit kind of Art Deco ones.
Okay.
The rooms are a bit, so they look okay. Yeah, it's an okay hotel. It's got a decent happy hour, two or three bars.
Is it located? You say it was on South Beach?
It's good. Mid Beach.
Mid Beach.
But our favorite place is Soho House, which is a really nice, top-notch hotel. We just go up there for breakfast. It's about 4 blocks up, and they do a lovely breakfast in there. So that's where we usually congregate.
Very cool.
Discount up there than we do in this hotel. So I don't know how that works. We're not staying there, but we get a good discount. It's great food.
Lane, on Thursday, I think we're going to shoot for something around, probably realistically around 4 o'clock Eastern, which is 16 plus 5, 21Z. Would probably be the earliest because I get home, I land in Atlanta at 1:30ish or so, and by the time I take transportation home and get everything set up, it's going to be probably around 4 o'clock or so on Thursday afternoon, local time in Atlanta. So, yeah, planned start time, right, Lane? Yeah, who knows really when we'll start, but there you go. Again, Fred, you got big plans for tonight? You got how late is it over there? Just
it's almost 1900. I'm going to hit the gym. I'm going to get some dinner, and I'm going to work. So that's the
okay.
Yeah, when I'm on the road like this, I try to just maximize the amount of work I get to do, and then when I get home, I can free to work on the house and get the bike and the airplane and everything else that needs a little bit of love. So,
all right,
we have I have a DA40 checkout this weekend, so that should be fun.
Ooh, nice.
Yeah.
Nice. The diesel version or the
no, the regular version. It has a stick in the middle, which is I think I'm just going to exclusively fly airplanes that have center sticks.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. So it says stick between your legs.
Stick between your legs, and then in the diamond, the throttle is on in the middle. So that's a little bit weird, but no, it's nice. G1000, you know, just really nice flight deck, nice canopy. Sits 4. So
cool. All right. We'll look forward to hearing about that when I see you. And
I'll see you guys in a couple weeks.
All right. Okay, everybody. Thanks for hanging with us today. Again, Thursday, late afternoon / evening is when we'll be on again. So until then, wishing you clear skies. Now I have to figure out how to stop this.